Story 1.
How I exposed my cheating wife, confronted her lies in front of family, and left her for good. Janet and I celebrated 12 years of marriage, having been sweethearts since the age of 10. Opting out of college, I landed an entry-level job as a draftsman at Desmond Engineering right after high school. A year later, we tied the knot, and the following year brought the joy of becoming parents to twin girls, Bethany and Brittany. Despite initial challenges, budgeting helped us through. While still a draftsman, I moved up a few grades, improving our financial situation. We managed to purchase a modest home and own 2 decent cars. Although not brand new, they were far from outdated. Janet fulfilled her dream of being a housewife, and with our financial stability, she didn't need to work. Both of us remained healthy and fit. Janet had a bit more stature than our wedding day, standing just over 5 feet tall, with dark brown hair and bangs, resembling little Marie Osmond. Personally, my physique hadn't changed much since my high school football days as the right tackle. Billy Martin moved to Reading from Lancaster about a year ago and took a job with Desmond Engineering as a surveyor. Billy and I played football against each other and immediately became friends. He also married his high school sweetheart, a redhead named Sarah. Sarah and Janet became instant friends. They didn't have children yet, but they were ideal nannies. When we weren't at work, Bill and I enjoyed each other's company. It was a pleasant breakaway from family life. Of course, Janet and Sarah did the same. They went shopping together, attended parties and club meetings, and Billy and I watched the girls on TV. Sarah also took a job as a secretary at Gilbert Engineering, located just outside the city. About 6 months ago, I began noticing changes. Previously, the PTA meeting was held once a month, but now it was once a week. Sarah, despite not having children, always visited Janet. The frequency of Tupperware and Magic Chef parties seemed to increase every month, yet they never made purchases. They joined a book club but never found time to read. On weekends, they spent hours shopping, buying very little. Janet's collection of fashionable lingerie grew, but I never got to enjoy any of it. It started bothering me. I never mentioned anything to Billy because he didn't seem to care. I didn't want to cause problems. About an hour after putting the girls to bed, Janet came home from some kind of basket party. She took a shower before Sarah picked her up and took another as soon as she got home. This seemed strange to me. While she was in the shower, I quickly checked the basket and found a set of black lace lingerie. Who would wear black lace lingerie to a basket party? I'm not in the habit of checking my wife's underwear, but I did this tonight and found that the underwear was wet and sticky. I put them in my pocket. Until tonight, I had never once delved into my wife's purse or wallet. The only thing I was really interested in was her cell phone. Apparently, she was pretty sure I wouldn't spy because she hadn't deleted a single call in the last week. The majority of calls were addressed to Sarah, but a large number of incoming and outgoing calls were addressed to KC, KH, and KW. Of course, I had no idea who they were, but I quickly realized that the C stood for cell, the H stood for home, and the W probably stood for work. I checked her address book, and Sarah also had 3 numbers listed: Sarah S, Sarah H, and Sarah W. I was amazed at how well organized my wife's phone was. Looking at Sarah's work number, I noticed that it had an extension. Checking KW's number, I found it was the same number as Sarah's, but with a different extension. It wasn't hard to guess that Janet was calling and receiving calls from someone who worked with Sarah. It was also easy to guess that Sarah must have been the one who introduced Janet and the mysterious company. Gilbert Engineering was now closed. I took Janet's phone and dialed KW's number. Upon approaching Ken Sanders' desk, I heard a recorded message stating that he wasn't available at the moment. The message suggested leaving a name and phone number for a callback after the signal. I ended the call, finding it too easy. Janet poked her head around the doorway and inquired if I was going to bed. I responded that I was almost done with the book and would get up when finished, acknowledging the possibility of falling asleep on the sofa. It was my intention to sleep on the couch. It was a restless night. I kept trying to figure out what I did wrong or what I could have done differently. It was a terrible waste of time and mental effort. Every time I redirected my thoughts to what I should do, they kept coming back to what I should do. I kept looking at the clock, and it didn't move. All I knew for sure was that I was not going to take any blame for what happened or what was going to happen. I woke up to the sounds of my 2 little angels cooking breakfast. Janet encouraged them to take care of themselves rather than wait. The idea was good, and it appeared to be effective. While stretching and scratching myself, my wife entered the room and mentioned that I should hurry up or I'd be late for work. I assured her it wasn't a problem as I wasn't going to work that day. When she questioned why, I explained it was due to too many personal problems. With a yawn, I headed towards the bathroom, realizing I needed a shower. Upon my return, Janet seemed a bit puzzled as the girls had already left for school. I grabbed a cup of coffee and sat at the table opposite my wife. who looked at me hesitantly, as if anticipating something but uncertain about what. I straightforwardly requested her to share details about her novel, sensing she might not readily open up and share her thoughts. In response, she asked if my downcast mood was due to suspicions of her being unfaithful. I confirmed my concerns and pressed her to discuss the novel. Despite being married for 12 years, she questioned why I would entertain such thoughts. I insisted on discussing her novel, citing my work commitments for the day and a refusal to engage in games. My wife, with affection, let out an exasperated sigh and leaned in, reassuring me that there was no romance in her novel. I sarcastically acknowledged her honesty but expressed my inability to appreciate it at the moment. She leaned back, sipping her coffee as if she had taken control of the situation. I then asked if she could answer a few simple questions, to which she agreed. I inquired about her frequent attendance at PTA meetings every week, despite the PTA secretary stating they only held monthly meetings and she hadn't attended one in 6 months. In response, she expressed confusion and a bit less sassiness, claiming she didn't understand what I was implying. I pointed out that she and Sarah attended non-existent PTA meetings every Tuesday and questioned why she would lie about such a matter. Janet took some time to reflect on the question and eventually found an answer. She apologized, explaining that on Tuesday nights, she and Sarah went to Rosie's Cantina for ladies' night to enjoy 2-for-1 margaritas. They hadn't informed me to avoid any misunderstandings, considering Billy and me. She admitted it was a mistake and promised to inform us from now on. I remained skeptical, stating that I would verify her explanation. I suggested Sarah might support her, but I questioned what the people at Rosie's might say. In response, she emphasized that I was making a big deal out of it. She then shifted the focus, asking about my behavior at little Tupperware parties, questioning why I took a shower before leaving and another upon returning home. I explained that it was to eliminate the smell of smoke from my hair, as many women smoked at those gatherings. She continued probing, asking why I wore fancy underwear to those parties but not for her unless it was a special occasion. I admitted not having a good answer, stating that I just wanted to feel dressed up when going out. Janet's lies began to irritate me, and I struggled to control my anger. Realizing it was time to address the situation, I confronted her with the soiled underwear I found the previous night, accusing her of deception. I expressed my awareness that the substance on the underwear was not mine and warned her against claiming it was due to a yeast infection. My anger escalated, and I demanded an explanation. Janet fidgeted in her chair, avoiding eye contact, seemingly unable to provide a quick response. Frustrated, I pressed her further, questioning why she had come home with soiled underwear and insisting on an explanation. She urged me to stop and expressed her inability to endure the situation any longer, claiming we had been married for 12 years. She questioned how I could treat her in such a manner. The continuous stream of lies and constant denial overwhelmed me. With all the strength I could muster, I hurled my partially filled coffee cup across the room, shattering the front of the microwave. This time, there was no doubt I had Janet's attention. The expression on her face was new, as she had never witnessed my anger before. Leaning over the table, I confronted her loudly, demanding information about Ken Sanders. She rose from the chair and moved towards the sink, trying to evade the conversation, repeatedly stating that he was just a friend. I persisted, asking if she had a close relationship with him. In a terrified tone, she admitted to it. I pressed further, questioning if she had slept with him the previous night. With remorse in her voice, she confirmed it, urging me to stop and expressing sincere apologies. She stood at the sink, sobbing uncontrollably. After pouring myself fresh coffee, I heard Janet's cell phone ringing. Her eyes shifted nervously between me and the phone as she suggested answering it, identifying the caller as Ken. I pressed the speakerphone button and greeted Ken, who sounded distressed, mentioning a call attempt on his work number the previous night. Janet seemed frozen with fear, and I nodded in acknowledgement. She hesitated in responding to Ken's inquiries about her presence and whether something was wrong. Eventually admitting that I was present and aware of their situation, I intervened, addressing Ken and informing him that I had some matters to attend to in the morning but promised to visit him in the afternoon. I suggested having emergency on speed dial. Ken didn't hang up but remained silent. Ending the call, I returned the phone to my pocket. Janet, now in her robe, stood at the sink trembling. Expressing my intention to leave, I posed one final question about the name of the guy Sarah was dating. She reacted by pleading with me not to ask. In her distress, she threw the second cup across the room, causing it to crash against the tiled wall behind the sink. In a hurried manner, she provided the name as Calvin, specifically mentioning Calvin Bostic. She informed me of her return later in the afternoon and instructed me to clear out my belongings before then. She mentioned her mother staying with the girls temporarily and assured assistance in retrieving any items I couldn't fit in my car. She emphasized not to contact her and requested informing her mother of my whereabouts. She remained still, offering no further words as I walked out the door. Of course, I had no idea what to do next. I decided to go into the office and see Billy. I considered him a friend and believed he should know what was happening. It was easy to deduce that Sarah met Calvin at work and became friends with him. Ken was likely Calvin's friend in need of a date. I might have simplified this a bit, but I thought it was close. Enough. Billy was absent from the office, probably engaged in some form of bidding or similar activities. I called him on his cell phone and shared the distressing news about Janet and Sarah having boyfriends, revealing that the supposed meetings and Tupperware parties were actually social gatherings. He questioned the credibility of the information and found it hard to believe. I suggested asking Sarah about a guy named Calvin Bostic who worked with her at Gilbert. As I suspected, she might have introduced Janet to someone from their workplace. Billy expressed disbelief upon learning about Calvin Bostic, as they had graduated together. I also mentioned a guy named Ken Sanders, describing him as a tall, skinny individual. I shared my belief that Janet would likely warn Sarah soon, as she had given me various excuses before finally confessing. After our conversation, I went to HR to request a short leave, finding it impossible to focus on work. It took only 10 minutes to transfer my tasks to another draftsman. Meanwhile, Janet's cell phone rang, displaying Sarah's name on the caller ID. I answered the call, pretending to be Janet, and inquired about the situation. Sarah apologized, thinking she was calling Janet, and mentioned that Billy had received information at the office. Expressing my anger and disgust, I asked Sarah to clarify what someone had said to Billy. She revealed that she intended to take Janet home and suggested that bothering Janet at that moment was not ideal, as she was busy packing her belongings. Surprised by this revelation, I questioned the reason for packing and learned that Janet planned to return to live with her parents temporarily. Enjoying the pause on the other end of the line, I smiled, imagining the scenarios running through Sarah's mind. In response, I advised her to inform Calvin about Billy's impending arrival, implying that he might appreciate a head start. Sarah reacted with shock and disbelief, exclaiming, "No, God, no!" before hanging up. This woman's nerves. We only had one credit card, so canceling it was no problem. We also had an at the moment or a debit card. It took me 5 minutes to change the PIN number. I had no idea what to do with the checking account, so I just ignored it for now. In any case, I needed it to pay utilities and other bills. I just hoped Janet didn't take any receipts with her. The cell phone rang again, but this time it was my phone. Billy chased Calvin Bostic out of the Gilbert building and caught him in the parking lot. He was in jail and wanted me to tell his brother from Lancaster to come and post bail for him. I called his brother. There was nothing more I could do for Billy, so after lunch, I went to Taco Bell. I visited my mom and dad, explaining everything to them. Mom was more than willing to watch the girls for a while. She stayed with me during the week, and the twins stayed with them on the weekends. Now it's time to visit Ken Sanders. The guys in Gilbert's drafting department were eager to tell me about Billy's visit that morning. The drafting department overlooks the parking lot, and they saw everything that happened. Billy caught Calvin before he could get to his BMW. He threw him over the hood of one of the cars and started smashing his face. The guards followed them and tried unsuccessfully to get Billy out. Finally, one of them punched Billy in the neck with a stun weapon. He wasn't home yet when they put him in the police car. They had to take Calvin in an ambulance. One of the guys showed me the office where Ken Sanders worked. It was empty. Looks like old Ken quit suddenly this morning. We walked past Sarah's desk. She wasn't there either, but it looked like she was still working there. 10 minutes later, I found out Ken's home address and headed to the parking lot. It was a small ranch with no garage. There was a white Lexus in the driveway, with the trunk and back doors open. As I approached the door, Ken Sanders came out with an armful of clothes. He dropped everything and rushed back into the house as soon as he saw me. I tripped over the things he dropped and managed to see him exit out the back as I entered. I had to laugh at his reaction. Damn, I wasn't like Billy, I was a good guy. It looked like the kind of place that would be rented fully furnished, that's why he didn't have a truck. In another 10 minutes, he would have finished and left town. I was looking forward to talking to Ken, but I didn't want to chase him. I looked around the room for anything interesting and got a few pleasant surprises. The first thing I picked up was his cell phone. It lay on the table in the living room next to a folder containing his passport and some personal documents. There was a cute little laptop computer on the dining table. I couldn't find anything else, so I packed up the few goodies I had and left. I didn't want to do anything that could be considered criminal, so I resisted the urge to crash his car. This was beautiful. I believe it might be considered a crime to take items from the house, but he left the door open and anyone could have taken them. Unable to restrain myself entirely, I let the air out of just one of his tires. He'd need to empty the trunk to access the spare tire, and I'm sure he'd do it with one eye on the street, searching for me. I'll retrieve it later, he got the message. I went to the prison to see Billy. His brother and he were occupied with legal matters, so I just waved and smiled at him. It seemed he had everything under control. Mom was already at home, and dinner had started. We chatted briefly, and then I brought the things I bought from Ken into the office where my computer and belongings were kept. Before I could examine them closely, Beth and Britt returned from school. I decided it would be best to inform them about what was happening before they inquired. I didn't get a chance. Bethany eagerly greeted me, questioning why Grandma was present and inquiring about Mom's whereabouts. I explained that Mom and I decided to take a break from each other and she would be staying with her parents for a while. Brittany seemed pleased with the news, claiming victory in a bet with Bethany. She gloated about winning and explained that their argument revolved around Mom cheating on me. Bethany, however, denied ever mentioning anything about Mom cheating, asserting that they were not naive and knew what was happening. She admitted that Brittany was right, and that Mom was indeed cheating on me. Expressing surprise at how I found out, she criticized me for being slow and too trusting. Brittany, in an unusual gesture, placed her hand on my shoulder, attempting to console me. The situation was surreal, a 12-year-old girl trying to comfort her father in the midst of a family crisis. One Saturday, when Mom and Sarah said they were going shopping at King of Prussia, Mom wouldn't let Brittany and me go with her. She said it was an adult shopping day, and she would compensate us for it later. When we got to school on Monday, 2 kids said they saw her with a guy in Nobles Grove. We called them liars, but one of the girls had a photo on her cell phone. It seemed pretty trivial. I thought there must be an explanation, but Britt said she was cheating. Why didn't you tell me anything? They both just shrugged. A couple of weeks later, Tracy Mercer's parents saw Sarah, Mom, and 2 guys at TGI Fridays in Allentown. They told Tracy about it when they got home. I sat dumbfounded. Thank God Grandma invited us to dinner. We didn't discuss the issue during dinner, and I apologized before the dessert arrived. Luckily, the twins decided to leave the topic for the rest of the night. I felt relieved. I had just started examining Ken's laptop when his cell phone received a text message. The message read, Dax4synf YJ. Dear Ken, sorry for the love, Janet. While I'm not the best at texting, I easily deciphered this message. It was sent from Sarah's cell phone, indicating that Sarah and Janet were together. Temptation got the better of me, and I couldn't resist letting Janet know that I had Ken's cell phone by spelling out Taj. I spent the next couple of hours examining files and folders on Ken's computer. Although I found no emails between Janet and Ken, there were intriguing emails between Ken and some old friends in Lancaster. What I read shocked me, and I certainly didn't appreciate it. Janet and I had been together for almost our entire lives, and now I discovered that I never really knew her. In less than a year, she seemed to have become closer to Ken than she had with me in almost 20 years. As I replaced the cartridge in the printer, I noticed tears streaming down my face. This wasn't my usual reaction. Her deception had hurt me, and now I felt the salt in the wounds. Perhaps because of my tears, I printed out several emails and a dozen photographs. I would have taken more photos, but I ran out of expensive paper. There were no explicit or suggestive images. All of them were suitable for mixed company. Beth poked her nose in the door and asked if she could call her mother. I didn't feel like I could refuse. My mother was with the twins while they talked to Janet, and she overheard everything. She didn't eavesdrop, but it seemed like the girls weren't trying to hide anything. Mom later told me that they didn't cut Janet any slack and blamed her for the whole problem. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. The emails were extremely interesting. Ken applied and got hired as an engineer for an alternative energy project in Spain. His start date was in 6 weeks. Apparently, he didn't inform Gilbert about his departure. I'm sure Sarah knew, but no one else mentioned it. He had all the documents ready for the trip except for my passport. I'm sure he could find a replacement, but he better hurry if he wants to set a start date. I guess he could always go to the police and report that I stole it, but I didn't think he would do that. He hasn't booked his plane tickets yet. One of the letters to a close friend explained a lot. Janet planned to get a divorce after joining Ken in Spain. She realized that I would never allow her to take the girls out of the country, so she was going to declare me an unfit father. The letter didn't go into detail about how she was going to achieve this, but it did indicate that it would be severe enough to revoke my visitation rights for the twins or custody. It was completely despicable. Ken wrote this letter, so it was all hearsay. I would have liked to have received something original from Janet, but I had to make do with what I had. I printed out several copies of this letter. Mom fell asleep watching Leno, so I sent her to our bedroom. The girls had already gone to bed. I fell asleep on the couch, and there were 4 empty beer bottles on the coffee table. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and bacon. Mom always prepared a good breakfast. The girls were finishing their cereal when I approached the table. I had to endure some good-natured teasing before I could start cooking the eggs. The conversation was casual until it was time for the bus. I expressed my concerns to the girls, informing them that their mother might try to separate us by labeling me an unfit parent to retain custody of them. I emphasized my openness to shared custody for their happiness, but clarified that I wouldn't give up my right to be with them. I urged them not to choose sides, but to be cautious and not believe any falsehoods. Brittany assured me that they were smarter than I thought and that they loved Mom but wouldn't let her damage me. She smiled, and Beth gave me a thumbs up before they left. After their departure, Mom refilled my cup and joined me at the table. She encouraged me to relax, assuring me that everyone was on my side. Following a shower and shave, I dressed slightly nicer than usual. Leaving the house with 3 mobile phones felt peculiar, and I made a mental note to purchase the cell phone charger that Ken had given me, though I probably wouldn't need it. I preferred to be prepared. I checked in at the family services office and awaited the caseworker's call. Upon receiving it, I was surprised to recognize the woman who assisted me, Jody Mitchell, whom I hadn't seen in over 10 years. She greeted me with a remark about our shared past in high school. She remembered me from those years when she was part of the goth group that stuck together, facing ostracization, particularly from athletes like me. Though she looked normal now, I couldn't forget her pink hair, black lipstick, and dark eye makeup. The sign on her desk read, J. Mitchell, indicating she likely hadn't married. 12 years ago I could understand it, but today she looked normal. "John, what can I do for you?" Her question interrupted my train of thought. I stuttered a bit and acknowledged Jody's appearance, to which she chuckled at my awkwardness. I apologized if my words had been embarrassing, and she reassured me to relax. She shared that halfway through college, she realized she could face the world authentically without a false facade. Jody mentioned she had been what I might call normal for almost a decade now, feeling much more comfortable this way. However, she acknowledged sounding patronizing at times and apologized for her difficulty in keeping her foot away from her mouth. Moving on, I asked Jody if there were any files or reports on me. She confirmed there was nothing under my name or Janet's, indicating that it seemed we were providing for our children rather than mistreating them. I affirmed having 12-year-old twin girls, Bethany and Brittany. Shifting the conversation to the main issue, I explained that my wife planned to leave me and take the girls with her. Jody acknowledged the commonality of such situations and inquired if there was a specific reason for her actions. I pointed out that there were no supporting documents or accusations in their records, expressing concerns about potential setups. Jody explained that their computer not showing anything didn't mean I was in the clear. She suggested my wife might be gathering information, like medical records or police reports, before reporting to their office. In response to my skepticism about being set up, Jody clarified that she wasn't saying I couldn't win. She questioned why I thought my wife would take such actions. Despite my initial reluctance, I felt compelled to share an email from Ken. I handed a copy across Jody's desk and inquired about its origin. I explained that I had taken the email from a computer through illegal access, recognizing its inadmissibility for legal purposes. I mentioned the word conspiracy without understanding its legal definition and expressed my confusion and concern about how to protect myself and my daughters in this situation, especially since I couldn't afford a lawyer. Jody Mitchell relaxed in her chair, and I maintained eye contact without blinking. She rocked back and forth before leaning toward me and suggesting I come back the next morning. I agreed and asked if I could keep the copy of the letter. After receiving confirmation, I left, and she bid farewell, expressing that it was nice to see me. I smiled and she returned the gesture, revealing a new side of Jody. Lacking connections to lawyers, I resorted to picking one from the phone book. Despite knowing about my wife's intention to divorce me, I wanted to secure my position. Given the circumstances, I wasn't certain about our financial situation in the coming days. So I paid the lawyer up front in cash for the entire package. I urged him to proceed in the fastest and easiest way, allowing her to have the house as it was worth less than the mortgage. I insisted on joint custody of the twins, with the possibility of taking full custody if feasible, and agreed to pay child support but not alimony. Billy called me while I was on my way to lunch, seeking housing, and I offered to accommodate him. We met at Taco Bell for lunch, and when I approached, Billy had a silly smile on his face. Curious, I inquired about the reason for his happiness. Billy shared that a friend at Community General Hospital had informed him about Calvin. Sarah had visited him at the hospital, unaware of Calvin's wife and children arriving. The situation became chaotic, leading to hospital security escorting Sarah out. Billy walked past Gilbert to talk to her but found that she was no longer there. I asked about the details of Calvin's family situation, and Billy admitted he didn't know why Calvin's wife didn't live with him, or why he didn't go home to his family on weekends. However, he expressed a lack of interest in these details. Billy decided to take a week off from work to sort out his affairs, and we planned to figure out his accommodation. Since my mother also lived at home, Billy intended to go to his house to gather some clothes and personal belongings, in case Sarah wasn't there. He had no intention of talking to her anymore. Later, on my way to see my insurance agent, I received another call from Cameron Wilcox, Janet's father. He requested my presence to help figure things out, mentioning Janet's despair and her unhelpful mother. The meeting would include Cameron, Janet, Janet's sister Carla, and myself. Despite uncertainty about the goals of the meeting, I agreed to be there in about 20 minutes. It was a somber gathering. I brought a folder of evidence and skipped the coffee. Who wants to start? John, Janet believes you're overreacting. She insists you were angry and coerced her into saying untrue things to appease you. According to her, she did nothing wrong, and you have no right to evict her. I sensed that my wife was presenting a highly embellished version of the events to her parents. While I understood her reluctance to admit infidelity, I resented her shifting the blame onto me. Cameron expressed his desire for facts to better understand the situation and questioned what I expected him to do. Prove she's a liar, or admit I made a mistake. I explained that Janet claimed not to have a boyfriend but just shared a few drinks with friends from Sarah's workplace, interpreting it differently. I pointed out that she had over 80 phone conversations with this friend in the last month and asked about the frequency of calls to Cameron and her mother. They both turned to Janet, who avoided eye contact. I raised the issue of Ken's cell phone, and when no one spoke, I asked Carla to read a text message sent to Ken right after I asked Janet to leave. The message apologized for the trouble and expressed love. Janet covered her face with her hands, and Cameron shook his head slowly. I shared photos from an outing Janet and Sarah claimed was at the King of Prussia Mall but was actually at Noble's Grove. Cameron questioned Janet about the hand-holding in the photos, suggesting that Ken was more than just a friend. Tears flowed slowly as this unexpected outcome unfolded. I presented more photos, indicating that they were taken at Olive Garden and Red Lobster. I mentioned the stains on Janet's underwear but decided not to discuss them at that moment. Cameron apologized for calling me in for such a situation, expressed his upset at being tricked, and shook my hand as I left. Janet left the room sobbing like a child, and there was no discussion about the stains on her underwear at that time. Cameron assured me that the situation wouldn't be ignored. Upon returning home, Mom and Billy had already set up a fold-out bed in the living room. It wasn't a hallway, just a small extra room where I kept my computer. Billy had a pile of extra clothes in the corner that he had taken from home. Sarah wasn't home when he arrived. The most interesting thing awaiting me was the mail, but in fact, it wasn't waiting for me, it was for Janet, a beautiful official envelope from the passport department. I knew I shouldn't open it, but I couldn't help myself. It was, of course, a passport, more precisely, a family passport. The photo featured Janet and the two girls. I remembered the girls mentioning getting their picture taken, but I never imagined it was for that purpose. Of course, my passport wasn't in the envelope. I immediately called Cameron and asked him to inform Janet that the goods had arrived. If she needed a passport, all she had to do was send Ken home to pick it up. I would only give it to Ken. I was usually at work when the letter arrived. I would never have known she received it. Cameron informed me they had asked Janet to find another place to live, and they had no idea where she was going. They seemed a little angry with their daughter. He promised to inform her about the passport. The dinner conversation mainly revolved around the girls. Bethany, with a shy smile, mentioned that a woman from Family Services named Jody had visited their school and talked to both of them together. They missed gym and geography due to the lengthy conversation. Beth and Britt expressed that Jody seemed to like me, though it was from a 1-hour talk. Carla interrupted dinner with a phone call, wanting to talk. We met at McDonald's, where she explained Janet's situation. Carla expressed doubts about my ability to answer questions, to which I agreed. She began by blaming Sarah for everything, describing Sarah's affair with Billy as thrilling and romantic in Janet's eyes. Janet claimed to have had a life with me that was only loving and reliable, lacking excitement and romance. Janet got involved with Ken Sanders when he joined Gilbert. While Sarah and Calvin had love-making moments, Janet and Ken were left alone, leading to a full-blown affair. She couldn't or wouldn't end it. as Ken captivated her with tales of his endeavors and proposed a trip to Spain, which she eagerly accepted. The major dilemma for Janet wasn't leaving me, but leaving the girls. She was aware that I would never allow her to take them abroad, so she planned to find a way to make me look bad. Carla explained that after talking with the girls, Janet realized they were closer to me than to her. As a result, she decided not to pursue custody if I agreed to a divorce without any conditions. I agreed to proceed without contesting it. Carla then mentioned that Janet would like to get her passport and asked if I had it with me. This raised suspicions about Janet's intentions, and I suspected she might still have hopes of taking the girls with her. The family passport played a crucial role in the deal. "Carla, my coffee is cold. I'm going to go home and take a hot shower. Do not call me anymore." "John, what the hell is wrong? How did I make you angry? You know damn well what you did. Do you two really think I'm that stupid? Go back to your sister and tell her there is no way she can have my daughters. Since you decided to do it, help her. I'll have to ask you never to talk to my girls again." Carla was talking on her cell phone as I left Mickey D's. I can only guess who she called. I arrived at the family services office before it opened. "You couldn't stay away from me, could you?" Jody walked into the office with a big smile on her face and a Starbucks cup in her hand. She motioned for me to sit down and apologized for not having more coffee. "I think you know that I talked to your daughters yesterday." I nodded and smiled. For some reason, I was a little tongue-tied, out of my element. I remembered that the same thing happened the last time I talked to her. Since I was with Janet my whole life, I never had the opportunity to develop any social skills with other women. Looks like I've paid for it now. Is something wrong, John? Apart from that, no. I wasn't trying to be smart. I just couldn't formulate the words. "I'm so sorry, Jody. I think I'd better leave. I'm not aware of all this morning. I'll call you later. Before you go, I would like you to know that I am getting a restraining order against your wife. I can't stop her from seeing or being with the girls, but I can stop her from taking them out of state or denying you access to them. It will be delivered to her before noon." This brought a big smile to my face, but I left the office anyway. I headed to the nearest Starbucks. This coffee definitely smelled good. Until today, everything was under control. Now I felt disheartened and bewildered. I drove around aimlessly for a while before heading home. Billy informed me that Sarah had relocated to her parents' house near Afa, so he was only returning to his place until he could sell or rent it out. He spent the morning at the bank, the insurance company, and the law office, hoping to secure some money from Gilbert. Unfortunately, they had no company policy against fraternization, making his efforts an uphill battle, as his lawyer explained. Passing by the hospital, he discovered Calvin was being discharged. Calvin's wife, in the process of completing her discharge paperwork, intercepted Billy, expressing her gratitude for his assistance and explaining her attempt to persuade Calvin to drop the charges. Surprisingly, she had been trying to mend the situation with Calvin for several years without success. After Billy left, I sat on the porch, nursing a beer. Mom brought me a meatloaf sandwich and joined me in silence, sharing the beer. She mentioned that Dad would come for dinner and stay the night. When Jody Mitchell arrived, Mom retreated into the house. Jody sat beside me, declining the cold beer I offered. We sat in silence for a few moments before she spoke. "I served Janet's papers about an hour ago. She was quite upset, by the way, staying with her sister." I finished the long neck I was holding. "It may seem good, but why do I feel so bad?" "In such situations, there's nothing good, John, just less bad." I pulled out another beer, hesitated, and returned it to the refrigerator. "Could you come in and explain all this to the girls? I get along with them, but no matter how carefully I phrase it, it might sound like I'm blaming their mother. I fear it could push them away. How about 7 tonight?" I nodded and she stood up, walking to her car. Halfway there, she looked back, a positive sign, and I smiled. She smiled back. Jody visited that evening and spent considerable time with Beth and Britt. Billy and I busied ourselves searching his house, removing anything that belonged to or reminded him of Sarah. Jody began frequenting our house several times a week, spending as much time with my mom as with the girls. I noticed she was avoiding me. While this suited me, I was curious. One evening after the girls had gone to bed, she sat beside me. I felt the need to talk to her, but she initiated the conversation. She asked if I had any wine, preferably with a cork. I explained that I had wine, but they all had screw caps. She found it amusing and requested something red, so I poured a bottle into a container that resembled more of a jug. As we drank, I gathered the courage to discuss the girls' well-being during her visits. She mentioned that the twins were fine and didn't necessarily need to see her. Surprisingly, she clarified that she visited to see me, not the girls. I was confused as she rarely engaged in conversation during her visits. She admitted that she thought I might have a rule against fraternizing with clients, which we both found amusing. To lighten the mood, she brought up the topic of tattoos and expressed surprise that I hadn't asked to see hers. I confessed that I had 4 tattoos from my high school days, 3 of which were easily visible and 1 more discreet. She playfully suggested a game of finding the tattoos. Maintaining quiet to avoid waking the girls, the 4th tattoo was in a secluded place, and I admired her for a while before she left, apparently before the twins woke up. However, I sensed they might have been aware of what occurred. I instructed my lawyer from the phone book to finalize and deliver the divorce papers. Janet, still residing with Carla, received the papers, but there was no response. Several more weeks passed, and my father's health declined. Mom spent more time with him than with me. Luckily, school concluded and the girls spent the summer with her. By the end of summer, Dad moved to a nursing home. Billy and I assisted Mom in preparing the family home for sale, and she moved back in with me. Jody visited the girls at their mother's all summer and spent 3 or 4 evenings a week with me. They went shopping and out to dinner together, and I appreciated the attention. Brittany and Bethany were giving, at least. I didn't envy them anymore. I was pretty sure they knew what was going on between Jody and me. Janet called the girls about once a week, but the conversations were always short and, according to her mother, seemed tense most of the time. The twins didn't even tell me she called. Billy's divorce from Sarah was finalized. I had no idea what my status was. He also decided he wanted to start his own surveying business and asked me to come with him. I didn't have enough money to contribute until my mom came to the rescue. When she and her father ran out of money, Medicare picked up his expenses. Instead of watching it all disappear, she thought I should use it for business. I believe she also thought of it as an investment in her future. 3 months later, Billy and I had our own small surveying business. Fortunately, my drawing skills developed into drawing stories. About a week into the new semester, the twins were visited by their mother. They thought they would go to the guidance office to see Jody, and they were both disappointed to see Janet. They tried their best to be polite and respectful to her, but they still couldn't. She told them she loved them both and was sorry things turned out the way they did. She was going to Spain to see the windmills and would send them some postcards. She promised to call them every year on their birthday and send them amazing Christmas gifts. They said she cried when she left. Janet never called me to tell me she was leaving, but the next week her parents showed up at the house. They apologized again for what Janet did, but made no attempt to defend her or justify her actions. Brittany and Bethany were their sole grandchildren, and they desired the opportunity to see them. I had no qualms about their request. They conveyed that Carla felt too ashamed to approach me, torn between her sister and her parents. 2 months later, my divorce was officially concluded. Jody and I opted to celebrate at Red Lobster. It was a rare evening without the girls, who seemed content. In fact, I believe they were somewhat elated. We spent the night at a local Holiday Inn. The twins welcomed me back with delight at 10 the following morning. Though they didn't voice it, they smiled from ear to ear throughout the day. A year later, everything was going well, but unfortunately, my father passed away. Mom considered relocating to Florida with her sister, but was reluctant to leave the girls. The twins thought their grandmother should part, but proposed that Jody take her place, even if she couldn't cook as well as my mother. They also insisted they were old enough to have separate rooms. It was an evident and viable plan. The girls received birthday cards from their mother, but there was no phone call. She also sent numerous postcards, all depicting Spanish windmills. I wasn't sure of the significance. For Christmas, she sent 2 stylish embroidered dresses, unaware that the girls were entering their teens and might experience a growth spurt. Surprisingly, they didn't mind that the dresses were too small. Gilbert Engineering became our major client. Billy was pleased to discover that Calvin was now teaching electronics at Lebanon County Vocational School, a significant downgrade. Calvin was no longer married, and Sarah remarried and relocated to California. Ken Sanders didn't last 6 months in his new job, now working in the States, but his whereabouts remained unknown. Billy sought information through his high school's alumni association. My best friend always believed I got away with Ken too easily. Strangely, the girls continued to receive postcards featuring windmills with no specific information, just general sentiments. Cameron informed me that Janet called them several times from her job at a travel agency in Barcelona. She never mentioned Ken or disclosed details about their past. Jody and I quietly got married in Maryland a year later. She was expecting, and Brittany and Beth were as thrilled as we were. They looked forward to having a goth sister, sharing a private joke that they never let me in on. The significance of Spanish windmills remained a mystery to me.
Story 2. My wife used open marriage to justify cheating, then set rules for me, so I filed for divorce. 2.5 years ago, my wife Sarah, 36 female, asked me 38 male to open our marriage. She strongly implied the alternative was divorce. After thinking it through, I said yes, primarily because we do have 2 children. I worked long hours, and divorce sounded horrible. So, I set up some ground rules: no bringing dates into our house, no dating mutual friends, acquaintances, family members, colleagues, and keeping things private. For the next 2 years, I focused on my job and on my kids. I worked long hours. The little free time I had, I devoted to my kids. I didn't have the time for dating, so I wasn't even trying. I moved to another room because the thought of Sarah having sex with another man, then sleeping in my bed, felt horrible. Our relationship became purely transactional. We became partners at raising kids. I didn't want to know anything about her sex life. This summer, I managed to fulfill my financial goals. I do not have any debt whatsoever. Both my kids have enough money in their college fund. And all I have to do is keep adding savings every month into the fund I made for their first home deposits. So, I did some math and decided to cut my work from 74 hours to just 30 per week. Sarah wanted to get indebted again to buy another house and a new car. I said no. I used my free time to finally have a vacation I really needed. Took the older son with me to tour the US together, did some renovation work on our house, turned the basement into a man cave, started working out, playing sports, leading a healthier life. Then, I actually started trying to land a date. For me, just having sex with somebody is not my thing. I wanted to at least be a friend before that, to go out together, watch movies, have fun, and have sex. So, I dated a couple of women and found Jane, with whom I clicked. With Jane, I was going out to concerts, art galleries, Comic-Cons, movies, and we would boink too. Sarah wanted to talk about my dates. I said no. Then I caught Sarah snooping through my phone, and we had a very strong-worded argument. Now, Sarah wants to update the terms of our open marriage. She wants us to repair our marriage by going to a counselor. She wants us to sleep in the same room, to go outside and have fun together. Our outside of marriage relationships are to be strictly sexual and nothing else, and we are to talk about our sexual partners. I told her that I'm content with the situation as it is, and I don't mind if she finds a partner to go out with. I encourage her to, and I don't want to talk about our partners. She is holding her ground. At this point, I'm split between trying to fix our marriage and handing her her divorce papers. I need advice, guys. Here are some relevant comments that OP said, replying to a few, but man, you were working 74 hours per week and spending your free time with the kids after she decided to open your marriage, at which point I pretty much focused on completing financial goals as soon as possible. I was working longer hours before that, but not that long, and I was finding time to spend with Sarah. Now that you have the free time, you're still choosing not to see your wife? I actually left her to initiate that if she wished to. She didn't. So, yeah, she probably just didn't estimate you'd be having full-on simultaneous relationships. Except, I'm not having 2 simultaneous relationships. Since Sarah decided to open our marriage, the 2 of us didn't have any intimate moments. We didn't sleep together, we didn't go outside together. After I switched to working 30 hours, she didn't initiate to change anything. Our relationship was co-parenting under the same roof, really. Once I started dating other women, she started snooping around. Once she found out I was dating Jane, she wanted to change the rules. Even then, she said nothing about closing the relationship, just changed to only having sex outside the marriage. Which boils down to me not being able to have a single intimate relationship. Update, January 29th, 2024. It sounds like you did a little bit less of opening your marriage and sort of just gave your wife permission to cheat and call it spicing things up or keeping things exciting. As soon as she found out you actually wanted some emotional connection, she cuts it off, because only she can have fun with other people. How dare you try to actually enjoy the experience? OP's update, several people asked for an update on my previous posts, so here it is. Me and my wife Sarah had 2 sessions with a couples counselor. The counselor was being very dedicated and professional. However, Sarah kept making demands, which felt very unreasonable and unfair. She wants to keep an open relationship, which is only about sex. She doesn't want to find a job and keep working. She wants us to buy a new house. In every variation, she stubbornly wanted to have 2/3 of these things. Today, during the counseling, she threatened divorce. After counseling, she said the counselor was taking my side and wanted to change to another counselor. Although I think the counselor was just trying to be fair and find a compromise. I had a talk with a lawyer and started divorce proceedings. She will get the papers in a couple of days. I will give her 2 months to start earning on her own, and after that, I'm not giving any money whatsoever to her anymore. P.S. I just wanted to add that I only started working 74 hours a week after she decided to open our marriage. Before that, I was working around 50 hours a week. I wasn't spending my time at bars and clubs either, helped with chores as much as I could, and I was home and available every weekend. Let's see what the community has to say. First up, wife, you know what'll fix this relationship? Buying another house and husband going back to working 70+ hours a week. That way, there's no time for other relationships, and I can have my cake and eat it too. Someone else adds, oh, I hadn't considered the possibility that opening the marriage might mean that he'd benefit too. Might be time for another ultimatum. The next person adds, I'm turning into an unskippable cutscene in therapy. Yet another example of a crappy partner who wants permission to F other people, is surprised to find out they are in fact a crappy partner, and their significant other can do better. Not quite cake-eatery territory, but not far from it. And one more person chimes in, she tried to be a cake eater when she said, hey, let's take on more debt so that you can keep working 74 hours a week. And I can spend your money with my lover. Good thing he stood his ground. It's clear that you've made efforts to adapt to the open marriage arrangement, but it seems like your wife's expectations and demands have become unreasonable and unfair. Seeking counseling was a positive step, but if your wife is unwilling to work towards a fair compromise, your choice to go forward with divorce proceedings is a smart one. Your decision to establish boundaries and take control of your own happiness is commendable, OP. And like the comment said, she just wanted to fool around with other people while her husband was out paying the bills and buying a brand new home for her to take her boy toys to. She's in for a rude awakening. What would you have done? What do you make of Op's soon-to-be ex giving him an ultimatum? Next up, a bit of the jelly bellies. After we opened up our relationship, younger men have been throwing themselves at me. Husband is displeased. I'm female, husband is male. We agreed to open up our marriage. I am LL and wasn't very interested in sex, and he is HL. Since we opened up our marriage, mostly younger men have been throwing themselves at me. I have been very picky, but there are a lot of them. My partner is a younger man who's unexpectedly attractive to me. He is the physical opposite of my husband. My husband is very displeased. He feels emasculated. I don't want to close my side of the relationship, but I don't want him hounding me for sex. Is there a compromise we can reach? Why does he feel this way when it was his idea, and he's also getting action? Let's see what some of the relevant comments have to say. First up, he doesn't want to open your relationship. He wants to have sex while you don't. The OP replies, that's why we opened it. He said he couldn't stand not having his needs met. The next person says, if he opened things because of your low libido, it could be hitting him hard emotionally if you're now far more sexually active with others than you were with him. You're not doing anything wrong, but I could definitely see him having anxiety about your romantic and sexual feelings towards him. The OP replies, I'm not far more sexually active with my other partner. I am happy with once a week, but our styles match up more than mine and my husband's. My husband is explorative and likes partners who are ready to go whenever, wherever. He is happy with his partners as far as I know. They have a lot of kinks they are exploring. I need non-sexual affection, kissing, foreplay to be in the mood. I prefer a delicate, more sensual touch. I still find my husband attractive, but I can't get aroused instantly and be ready to go. It's painful, and it feels like a chore half the time. I don't think he finds me that attractive anymore, but that's life. Some folks don't actually understand what an open relationship is actually about. Open relationships are relationships just like any other. There are boundaries, just like a monogamous relationship. Maybe sometimes cheaters use open relationships as an excuse to have relations with others and for their partners to be okay with it as it happens right under their nose. Maybe that's because people don't actually sit down and discuss the full parameters of it all and what it means to both of them. Open relationships aren't always just about what happens in bed. Update, I talked with my husband, and we have more clarity on where we stand. To clarify, I am still low libido. I'm happy with once a week or every 2 weeks. My husband is explorative and likes partners who are ready to go whenever, wherever. He has a lot of kinks that they are exploring. I need non-sexual affection, kissing, foreplay to be in the mood. I prefer a delicate, more sensual touch. I still find my husband incredibly attractive, but I can't get aroused instantly and be ready to go. It's painful and feels like a chore half the time. I know he doesn't find me as attractive. He told me he needed his needs met, and I couldn't fulfill them. We opened up the relationship. My husband and I had sex once since it began. He had learned things from his partners. We both hated it. I didn't like him yanking my hair hard or wrapping his hand around my throat, let alone the kinkier stuff he wanted. He hated how frigid it was. My husband needs sex to be affectionate, but we weren't having it, so he told me to go find affection somewhere else. I tried dating apps, but I wasn't interested in hookups. I really wanted affection, romantic or platonic. Ironically, men my age or older were looking for younger women or hookups. Younger men and women were more likely to want affection. I ended up meeting my partner in person through a mutual hobby. I also made some friends through friendship apps. My husband and I have and can do our own things separately, but my partner needs a lot of time, affection, and attention from me. He gets a bit territorial. I don't think he feels threatened by my husband, but my husband has remarked that my partner is always over. My husband has an apartment for his partners and lets me use the house. Finally, I talked with my husband about why he feels emasculated. He says he is over jealousy about me, but he is jealous about my partners. He says that my partner and the men I attract are far more attractive than I should have been able to get. It made no sense, as I have aged and don't look as attractive as I did back when I was 20. Meanwhile, he should be in the peak of his attractiveness. He's very put together. And he expected that, as an attractive older man with disposable cash, that women would be flocking to him. They do, but he doesn't like them for various reasons. Attractive young women want him to spend a lot of cash. They're not interested in an equal relationship and expect him to spoil them. They're bratty and entitled. Attractive young women who don't want money have mental health issues. Young women in the kink community and who are poly were ugly, would be mistresses, or would leave when they found out he was in an open marriage. I don't know what to say. I can't help him with this problem. Edit. My husband and I both thought that I would only get men interested in no-string sex or one-night stands, which I would not be interested in. Rather than a close, affectionate, frankly committed relationship that I desired and filtered for. Surprisingly, there are men who wanted the latter. Edit 2, there are a lot of comments saying my husband has few prospects or he isn't getting as much action as he thought. This is untrue. He's a very handsome man and has been with several women since we opened up. A lot of women are attracted to him. He has sex with beautiful women, kinky women, accomplished women. He should be happy. At this point, I think he's just looking for something to be unhappy about. There is no perfect partner that meets his requirements. Now let's get some relevant comments from the community. So basically, he wants some beautiful woman in her prime, who has a successful career, disposable income, great mental health, and is happy to be settled as his mistress. Oh yeah, can't forget the fact he expects her to have sex on demand and be very kinky. It looks like he has very high standards. The op replies, also, someone who is kinky and sexually open to do a lot of things. I told him he should compromise, but he's unwilling because he's found plenty of women who fulfill some of his expectations. So he thinks he can find someone who will fulfill all of them. I don't think he's looking for a person, just a manifestation of all his desires. Sounds like your husband is looking for a fantasy, an itch that can't quite be scratched. And it sounds like it's all a him problem. The fact that he's jealous is not your problem at all. He agreed to the open marriage, and now he's upset that you're behaving as if it's open. How does that make sense? Seems like he's realizing that an open relationship isn't quite what he expected. Whatever it is, you guys aren't on the same page. What do you make of all this? Finally, a daughter who wasn't interested in a trip down memory lane. I have no idea how to proceed with this one. My wife and I just met my father-in-law's middle school and high school sweetheart, who cheated and left for his best friend. She recognized my wife as his daughter the second she saw her. My question is, why now? Why after 34 years? What was she trying to accomplish by ambushing and upsetting my wife? Also, any advice on how to resolve this would be appreciated, as I have no idea what to do or how to approach this. I cannot talk to my father-in-law, at least not at the moment, as he is a truck driver and is currently somewhere in Central Europe. And while on the road driving, anything that can distract him from the road, outside of absolute emergency, is absolutely off limits. I apologize in advance for the rate that I might be responding anxiety, but I will read everything and would be grateful for any bit of advice or shared opinion that you can give me. So we go to a town next to ours because I had work to do there. Rain started pouring and my shoes were soaked in seconds. Thanks to a recommendation of a friend of ours, we entered a shop that had very good quality shoes imported from Germany. The lady started staring at my wife the second she saw her. She still gave me good shoes and I bought them plus warm socks that she gave me as a gift. Then she asked my wife if she was from our hometown, to which she replied yes. Then she asked her if she was my father-in-law's daughter. My wife was a little taken aback by the directness of the question, but still confirmed. Then the lady revealed that she and he dated all the way from middle school to the end of high school, when she left him. But when she returned, he had moved on. She was alone for some time, but ultimately moved on as well and got married to her husband, who was from this town, and she moved in with him here. She then complimented my wife and told her that last she saw her, she was 10, wife is 31 now. She asked my wife many questions about my in-laws, and my wife answered several times before I came to my senses, and, upon seeing how upset my wife was getting, gave an excuse for us to leave. Father-in-law's ex sent us a hi to my father-in-law and told us not to be strangers. My wife started crying the second we left the shop, and honestly, the way she was ambushed, I do not blame her. I blame myself for not reacting quicker. If I did, I could have spared her at least more of the situation. On the ride back, my wife was very quiet, which was unusual for her to be. When we got home, my mother-in-law, who was watching our kids, greeted us at the door, and my wife gave her a long, silent hug, which was a clear sign of how upset she was, and just left for our bedroom. My mother-in-law was puzzled, and I told her everything. She took it relatively calmly and told me what my father-in-law's ex left out. She had cheated with his best friend since childhood at the time and ultimately left to be with him. 6 months later, she left the affair partner after catching him cheating and tried to get back with my father-in-law. But he rejected her as he had moved on and was already dating my mother-in-law. She did not take it well, and even tried on several occasions to break them apart using very dirty methods, even attempting to involve my father-in-law's sister and his parents, who were close friends and neighbors. Both attempts were unsuccessful. As of now, my wife is in her room, and I will talk to her when I get my bearings on how to approach this. I also want to give her breathing space so she can process the situation, and we can talk about it with clear heads. Let's see what the community thinks. First commenter: there's nothing to solve here. You've encountered an incredibly malevolent person in your family's life. This isn't a person or situation that can be fixed by any of you, so best not to contact her. Fortunately, your father-in-law has found good, healthy support in his wife and family. That's commendable. My best advice is to listen to your wife when she's ready to talk. She's unable to articulate a rush of awkward and negative feelings, which is completely normal. It's good you were there because you can relate and help her recognize what she's going through in a way that's neither dismissive nor coddling. Good on you for disrupting the dynamic. May your protective instincts serve you both in a long and healthy marriage. The next person says, I think the timing was accidental, and this woman has carried the truth and guilt of how she treated your father-in-law for 34 years and sees an opportunity to soothe her own guilt by now making everything seem normal, like they were just a couple that used to date, minimizing her choice and the effects on your father-in-law of that choice. Nobody wants to be remembered as a cheater, yet even 34 years later she still carries that choice. One more comment. She met the woman that effed up and realized it. The woman didn't ambush her, you came to her by chance. So, you're a woman around 50, and you work in a shoe store, and you have some regrets for some things you did when younger. This young woman walks into her store one day, and she looks shockingly like one of those regrets, maybe the biggest one. Her first love, whom she spent part of her childhood and teen years with, and then betrayed for nothing. And he has a daughter, and that could have been her daughter. She's not thinking clearly at all. She confirms that it is indeed his daughter. And then there are all these regrets and emotions, and she has to tell someone. She didn't want to hurt your wife. Maybe she still lacks the empathy which led her to cheat in the first place, but she just has to say something, to share with someone. I'm sorry your wife was upset by this, but it should just confirm to her that her dad is a good guy and a strong one for not taking a cheater back. These events led to her birth, your marriage, you guys are all lucky to have each other. This woman may have never experienced that because of what she did. I pity her. Yeah, the comments are right here. There's really nothing to solve and nothing for you to do or that you should do. Don't give it any more energy. This woman doesn't deserve it, and although your wife was upset, as it can be jarring to hear, rest assured that your father-in-law is a good man, and that all is as it should be. All that's to say that the woman is unhinged and was just looking to stir the pot. Update: this is what happened after I posted this. I took my time, and after a while I got to my wife's room. In addition to our shared bedroom, we have separate rooms at home that we use as offices. And I hugged her and told her that I loved her and was there for her when she needed me. She took her time, but in the end, she opened up to me and told me how she feels. She was not upset by the ghost of her father-in-law's past coming to life, but by the way this woman acted. She was still nice but was asking questions in a very invasive and unwelcome way, and the way she recognized my wife was unsettling. It took her by surprise. This was and is not an emotionally fragile person who cannot handle strangers. Hell, she handled my crazy ex, who made an attempt to get back with me many years ago, but she has her limits. I also spoke to my mother-in-law on the phone, and she revealed some more things about this woman. See, in addition to this woman trying to break up my in-laws when she found out about them, she did something that got me seething with rage. 4 years after attempting to get back with my father-in-law, she encountered my mother-in-law, my wife who was a toddler at the time, and my mother-in-law's wife's maternal grandma. Long story short, she made a scene and threw a rock at my mother-in-law. The rock hit my wife in the forehead instead. She was not even 2 at the time. My wife's grandma and some people chased her off. This was the same woman we met. My wife still has the scar on her forehead. This woman was not sorry for what she did. My mother-in-law told my father-in-law's parents and they told hers. From then on out, there were no problems whatsoever. After some time, my anger subsided, and I realized that this was not the present issue, and right now, my wife needs me, and she is my priority. After dinner, and after we put our kids to bed, I told my wife that we were never going to this lady's shop again. We were done with that situation, and the day as a whole. We just had to put this behind us, and what better way to do that than to sleep on it? After all, the dawn is brighter than the dusk. Today, after breakfast, I took my wife out for a walk. Our hometown is small, but it has a beautiful park on the south bank of the Danube River. We got there, and we got to our favorite restaurant. It is a 3-story building that has incredible views of the river, and we just spent a good time together. We talked again, and put this thing behind us. I mean, what else could we do at this point? We got home, and everything was okay. We are going to forget about yesterday and this woman. This ghost of the past will remain a ghost. I also decided that I will not tell my father-in-law, as it would serve no purpose at this point. To end this on a cheerful note, the shoes are really good. Commenter: this sounds like a solid plan, OP. Taking time to spend together and focusing on your relationship is a great way to move forward. It's important to prioritize your own well-being and to create boundaries with people who bring negativity into your lives. I agree with your decision to not involve your father-in-law in the situation. At this point, it seems that it would only serve to stir up old wounds without any productive outcome. Overall, it sounds like you handled the situation with empathy and understanding. And I hope that you and your wife can continue to support each other in all aspects of your lives.
Story 3.
I woke up one Sunday morning, rolling over to gaze at my wife of 5 years. Rose woke up too, pulling my head toward hers and gently kissing me. Acknowledging Rose's fatigue, she mentioned that I had worn her out the previous night. I explained that my intention was to get her pregnant. Reassuringly, she wrapped her arms around me and conveyed that I would get her pregnant, asking me to be patient. We lay in bed, chatting as usual. Our conversation revolved around her work, with Rose determined to secure a promotion to the regional sales management position. After a few minutes of the familiar work-related discussion, I suggested she take a shower. While Rose suggested that I shower, she agreed with the plan for me to run out and grab one of my specialty coffees. As I headed toward the door, I realized I had forgotten my car keys and turned back. Knowing Rose kept a key to my car in her purse for emergencies, I spotted her purse on the kitchen counter. Instead of going back upstairs, I decided to retrieve the key from her purse. Digging through the clutter, I discovered a zipper on the inside. Unzipping the compartment, I found the birth control pills Rose had promised to stop taking. She had gone off birth control a couple of months ago as we were trying to start a family. Examining the package, I noticed a third of the pills were missing. Turning it over, I saw the prescription label with a date only a few weeks ago, indicating she was still on birth control. I put everything back as I found it and quietly went upstairs to get my keys without Rose hearing me. On my way to get her coffee, my mind was buzzing with thoughts. I couldn't fathom why she would lie to me about being off birth control. I was confident she wasn't having an affair, as when she wasn't at work, she was with me. Her close girlfriend was the only variable, but her husband was also my best friend. I felt I knew where she was almost all the time, except during work hours. Feeling truly disappointed and under the impression that she didn't want to have kids despite seeming to be trying, I was lost in my thoughts. Around 4 p.m., Rose shook me out of my reverie. Observing my distant demeanor, she encouraged me to prepare, emphasizing that we were running late for dinner at Bill and Sherry's. Additionally, Bill had requested her assistance in his shop afterward. Upon arriving at their place, Bill sensed that something was amiss and asked about it. Initially, I insisted that nothing was wrong, but he persisted, claiming to know me better than I knew myself. He urged me to share my concerns. Reluctantly, I disclosed what I had discovered, that Rose had stopped taking the pill a couple of months ago. We explored potential reasons for her actions when Bill suggested the idea of hiring a private investigator. Bill suggested that I needed to understand the situation, emphasizing my emotional state and noting that only a few hours had passed. He assured me that Rose wasn't having an affair. When I questioned him to provide evidence, he suggested, "If you're so sure she isn't, what are you afraid of? Hire a PI. Once he confirms she's not involved with someone else, you can talk to her about kids and maybe better understand why she lied about taking the pill." On Monday morning, I enlisted the services of a private investigator, a professional our company utilizes for security matters and other concerns. After a conversation, the PI reassured me that it doesn't seem like Rose is having an affair. Based on the information, I informed him that I would conduct some checks, both during her work hours and off-duty. I also expressed the need to look into her medical records, as women can have unexpected issues. Despite periodic check-ins from the PI, I received no significant updates. Despite my attempts to conceal my emotions, I found myself unable to engage in closeness with Rose. Finally, on Saturday, Rose confronted me, demanding an explanation for my avoidance. Attempting to shift the blame, I accused her of lacking interest in closeness, triggering a major argument, our first significant fight. When I confided in Bill about it, he warned me that unless I changed my behavior quickly, Rose would suspect something was amiss. Taking Bill's advice to heart, I humbly sought forgiveness, attributing my actions to fear. Rose appeared puzzled, but now also concerned, making me wonder if she might be having an affair for the first time. As the days passed, I struggled to maintain my sanity. Bill played a crucial role in helping me stay focused and optimistic. In the middle of the third week, I began thinking about Rose's upcoming 25th birthday and wanted to plan something special. Taking inspiration from Bill's wife, Sherry, I decided on a half 50th birthday party, including a walking cane cut in half and other creative elements. During a Thursday morning meeting with the PI, which I expected to last no more than 30 minutes, we ended up talking for over 2 hours. After the PI departed, I sat in a daze until the phone rang. Knowing I had met with the PI, Bill called me and we arranged to meet. I needed a drink, a strong one, and by the time Bill joined me at the bar, I was on my third. Seeing my condition, Bill remarked, "This isn't good, is it?" The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by intense anger. As I slid the folder over for Bill to peruse, I briefed him on the condensed version of the PI's findings. Bill examined the pictures with times and dates, inquiring about the CD in the folder. I explained it was a video of Rose and her boss in a relationship process situation. The PI had advised me to watch the video, and more importantly, listen to the dialogue. Bill called his wife and instructed her to take Rose to the movies or the mall, under the guise of planning her birthday party. Sherry, enthusiastic about helping with a positive surprise for Rose, complied. Bill and I watched the CD, and it brought tears to my eyes. The PI was correct. I was genuinely surprised by Rose's motive for being with her boss. She was pursuing the promotion she had discussed for months. We sat in silence, simply asking if we wanted another drink. After a while, I confided in Bill, expressing that if Rose had come to me and confessed to falling in love with her boss, or needing more satisfaction than she was getting from me, I felt I could handle it. While I acknowledged I would be hurt and disappointed, the idea of witnessing my wife with her boss just to secure a promotion went beyond mere hurt. I conveyed that I was not only hurt, but also furious, and I made it clear that Rose would feel the full extent of my anger. Bill then remarked that observing Rose and her boss was like seeing her physically there, but emotionally absent. He noted that, regardless, she had prioritized her job over our marriage, and now she would have to live with that choice. Handing me my drink, Bill added that the girls would be home soon and asked if I knew what I was going to do. I responded, stating that I believed I knew what to do. Looking up at Bill, I continued by sharing that next Monday was Rose's birthday, and I was determined to give her a surprise birthday party she would never forget. Acknowledging the need to act fast, I mentioned that I would require Bill's help, and proposed involving Sherry if that was acceptable to him. Bill agreed, stating that Sherry and Rose were close, assuring me that Sherry wouldn't do anything to hurt Rose. He clarified that Sherry wouldn't be involved for that purpose. However, he noted that Sherry knew all the people to invite, and he emphasized the importance of my presence at the party to help execute his plan. Feigning more intoxication than I was, I successfully avoided Rose when the girls returned home. The next workday, I consulted with a computer-savvy colleague in the shipping department, detailing my requirements for pictures and a video, which he assured me he could easily create. I called Sherry and shared with her that I planned to use her idea, but wanted the party to be a surprise. I suggested having it on Sunday afternoon around 3 p.m. and asked for her assistance. Sherry enthusiastically agreed. I instructed her to contact all the people for the party and mentioned that she would need to get Rose out of the house on Sunday for a few hours. Just before we hung up, I told her I would inform Rose's parents. Next, I went over to Rose's work, asking her to lunch, which she told me she couldn't do as she was to be in a meeting. That was fine because the reason I went there was to invite her boss to her birthday party. I informed him about a surprise birthday party I was planning for her and expressed that it would be great if he could attend. I suggested bringing his wife, adding that it would be a fun gathering. I expressed my hope that he could come and requested that, if possible, he should park at the grade school. This way, when Rose's friend brought her home, she wouldn't see all the cars. I mentioned that a friend of mine would be escorting the guests from the school to my house and emphasized that it would be a fun event. I concluded by expressing my hope that he could make it. Next, after work, I went to Rose's parents' house, telling them my idea for the birthday party. Rose's mom gathered some pictures of Rose from childbirth up to our wedding. Later that night, I went to the computer guy's house. I showed him everything I had and gave him my idea of how I wanted the evening to go. He didn't say much, but after listening to me, he suggested a different way, which would have a more significant impact on everyone. I liked what he suggested, and after agreeing to his idea, he told me he would have it done and ready for me by Saturday. Wednesday, I went to a lawyer's office and initiated divorce proceedings with the reason being infidelity. Additionally, the attorney suggested pursuing legal action against her boss and the company they work for, expressing confidence in obtaining compensation from Rose's company. On Friday evening, I had Bill sitting across the table from me. I commented that when you think things can't get worse, they seem to find a way. Bill asked me in response what I meant. Well, Wednesday, when I went to see the attorney, I spent more time there than I thought I would. When I left the attorney's office, my mind was filled with my marriage problems, causing me to forget to go back to work and send off the bid for a job. The company lost out on the job, so today they suspended me for 30 days without pay. If it weren't for my boss, who knows that my marriage is going down the tubes, I would have been fired. My boss, though, wants me far away from Rose and this mess so I can get my head screwed back on. He gave me his timeshare that he has in Mexico to use, telling me that if I want to keep my job, I'll be in Mexico no later than Wednesday. Bill inquired if I was going. I replied affirmatively, expressing that I couldn't afford to lose this job. I suggested we proceed with discussing the details and potential scenarios. At Rose's surprise birthday party, I explained how the pictures were going to be displayed and also how I hoped the evening would go. Once I started the picture event, Bill was to ensure that Rose's boss didn't get away, as I wanted him to see the entire show. I also told Bill that the person playing the bartender would also be serving the divorce papers to Rose and papers to her boss. Arriving home, Rose was upset and demanded to know my whereabouts. I explained that I was with Bill. She dismissed it, saying it was no big deal. However, she disagreed, arguing that it was a big deal because she had come home early with great news, and I wasn't there. Rose accused me of excessive drinking and avoidance, stating that it seemed like I had a girlfriend. My face turned red, fueled by anger. Seeing my reaction, Rose appeared concerned. How could she accuse me of having a girlfriend while she pursued a job promotion by being involved with her boss? On the verge of losing my temper, Bill's voice echoed in my head, prompting me to apologize, deny having a girlfriend, and inquire about the good news. She shared with great excitement that she got the promotion and starting next month, she would be the new regional sales manager. Rose expressed her joy by jumping up and down, then running into my arms and hugging me tightly. Surprising me again when I didn't think she could, with her arms still around me, hugging me tight, Rose conveyed, "Now we'll get that baby we want." Pushing her back to arm's length, I inquired about the meaning behind her words. Rose promptly nestled herself back into my chest and conveyed that our luck was changing, expressing a sense that things were going our way. She shared the news of her promotion and professed her love, confidently anticipating that I would be the one to make her pregnant. Following that, she looked up at me and sought confirmation about my desire for a baby. Rose, seeing the tears in my eyes, thought they were because of the baby, when in fact the tears were because I was soon going to lose the only woman I have ever been in love with. Grabbing me by the hand, Rose led me to her bedroom. We climaxed together. Rose expressed a desire for closeness again on Saturday morning, and I complied, although my involvement was perfunctory. While I was in the shower, Rose entered with a concerned expression and inquired about any concerns bothering me. She conveyed surprise at her recent inability to outlast me in lovemaking. In response, I encouraged her not to dismiss the possibility that something might be wrong. I pointed out my altered behavior over the past few weeks and the excessive consumption of drinks. Swiftly changing the subject, I admitted feeling responsible for our inability to conceive, suggesting a potential issue with my body. I proposed the idea of seeking medical advice, considering she had been off the pill for several months. Looking at her, I mentioned, maybe there is something wrong with my body, and I should see a doctor. After all, you have been off the pill for several months now, right? Rose took hold of me, and without directly addressing my question, proceeded to provide a significant pep talk, emphasizing that I was placing too much pressure on myself. She also said that now she has gotten her promotion at work, she too will be more relaxed. And even though she just can't explain it, she knows that I'll get her knocked up very soon. I thought to myself, I bet you could explain it if you wanted to. Saturday night, Rose wanted lovemaking again, but this time I did too. It would be the last time for us, so I gave her all I had. I think tough. She could tell that there was very little lovemaking on my part. It was just lovemaking. Sunday morning came, and I wasn't as nervous as I thought I would be. While Rose was taking a shower, I called Sherry, asking her if she had a plan to get Rose out of the house. Sherry assured me that she did, and told me she was proud of me for giving this party for Rose, as she knew Rose would always remember it. I nearly chuckled, thinking she'd remember this for quite some time. When she descended the stairs, I inquired about her plans for the day. Why? She asked. I explained Bill had called, needing my help with Sherry's honey-do list. Rose responded, "Great," as Sherry planned breakfast for the four of us, followed by helping her choose bedroom drapes. At 3:10, Sherry followed Rose into our house, everyone shouting surprise. Rose, greatly surprised, approached me with a big hug, thanking me as she had no clue about the birthday party. Scanning the guests, I heard Rose ask Sherry if she invited her boss. Sherry's negative response brought back that worried look on Rose's face. With my two key people in place, the party kicked off, with people laughing and mingling. I waited for almost 2 hours to ensure everyone had food, mostly lots of booze. With Bill's help, we gathered everyone in the living room, preparing for the show of the year. Addressing everyone, I expressed gratitude for their presence and suggested taking a look at the first half of Rose's 50th birthday before proceeding with the opening of cards and gifts. Smiling at Rose's parents, her cousin, and her boss with his wife, I gestured for everyone to be seated. Once everyone was settled, anticipation filled the room as they knew the theme of the party. Switching on the TV and my laptop, I announced, "Here we go." The first picture displayed Rose at 2 months, unclothed, lying on the bed. Whistles and jeers followed my comment, noting the nice spot on her. Rose blushed deeply as subsequent pictures slowly appeared on the screen. I joked or explained each picture, occasionally seeking input from her mom, resulting in teasing moments. From grade school to high school, I highlighted Rose's unwavering motivation. College pictures showcased her determination, including snagging me. Laughter echoed, and Rose enjoyed the show. Our wedding picture followed, with comments about my long hair. A picture of Rose's workplace appeared, then her desk, earned through promotion as the top salesperson. The next picture showed Rose's boss with his wife at our table during the moss party. Rose sat next to her boss, another employee beside her, with me absent. Rose's smile faded, replaced by a worried look. Glancing at her boss, who also lost his smile, I suspected exchanged glances. I expressed hope that Rose's boss acknowledges her dedication, hard work, and aids her in securing the coveted regional sales manager position. As I finished, I looked directly at Rose, sensing fear, as she had revealed her promotion to me. I started the video, emphasizing Rose's hard work for the new position. More pictures, everyone. The video displayed an empty bed with Rose telling her boss it was the last time. As per their agreement, the video transitioned to Rose on the bed with her boss between her legs. Simultaneously, her boss urged her to take certain actions if she desired the promotion. This led to gasps and some people leaving as the video swiftly changed to depict Rose on her hands and knees with her boss behind her, holding onto her hips, engaging in a specific relationship process position. During the transition, her boss expressed satisfaction, noting that with this performance, she would be promoted to the vice president status. The video had played for about 15 seconds, with an additional 15 seconds left, showcasing 2 more positions. But chaos erupted. Rose, in a frenzy, screamed for me to turn it off, tearfully apologizing. Her boss attempted a swift exit, but my friend Bill instructed him to stay put. A punch to the jaw from Bill left her boss seated when he tried to push past. My ally shouted the boss's name, and when the foolish person responded, he was served legal papers, tossed into his lap. Sherry, attempting to console Rose, missed the boss's wife approaching. Seizing Sherry by the hair, she shoved her, causing Sherry to fall onto the couch where they were seated. As Sherry fell, she pulled on Rose's arm, turning her to face the boss's wife. While insulting my wife, the boss's wife landed a right hook on Rose's cheekbone. Rose was propelled backward, landing on her side. Sherry leaped up, yelling as she grabbed the boss's wife. Bill swiftly approached the women, and when Sherry was shoved again, Bill caught her before she hit the floor. I hurried over to intervene, but with Rose on the ground and Bill holding Sherry, I thought the worst was over. The boss lady turned, looking at Rose and hurling insults. Rose, now on her hands and knees, reached over to place her hand on the ottoman, slowly lifting her knee and attempting to stand. Rose tried to stand, but her head was still spinning from the punch. This left her back toward the boss lady with her legs about a foot apart. I reached Rose to help her up and ensure she didn't get hit again. Turning my head to check the boss lady's location, I saw her take a full step toward my wife. Then, like an NFL punter, she kicked Rose squarely between her legs. Just as I put my hand on Rose's arm, I felt the impact rock her entire body. If the boss lady were punting a football, it would have easily gone 40 yards. Rose's body went 2 feet up and 3 feet forward. Rose let out a scream louder than I had ever heard. Landing on top of the ottoman and bouncing off, she fell onto her side. Rose screamed from the moment she was kicked until she finally landed on the carpet. Once on the carpet, Rose's knees came up to her chest, hands between her legs, crying harder than I had ever heard anyone cry. Bill seized the boss lady by the back of the neck, pulling her out of the house and directing her and her husband to leave. As Bill forced her out, the boss lady shouted that a particular circumstance wouldn't lead to a promotion now. Sherry hurried over, kneeling down to assist Rose and shouting at me to step back. Disregarding Sherry, I approached Rose's side, reassuring her that I had not intended for anyone to damage her. Rose was in so much pain that I know she didn't hear me. Then, looking down, I saw blood seeping into her cotton pants. I grabbed Sherry to get her attention. Pointing to the blood, Sherry quickly told me to call ambulance. I didn't ride with Rose in the ambulance but instead took my car. I hadn't planned on this physical assault, nor had I wanted Rose physically hurt. I wasn't sure what I was going to do at this time. Bill, Sherry, and I were in the waiting room when the emergency doctor came to talk to us. He informed me that Rose was going in for surgery as soon as the specialist got there. He asked me what happened, and I told him that she was kicked in the groin by another woman. After a few more questions, he asked me if I wanted to see her, which I said no. A few hours later, the operating doctor approached me to provide an update. They mentioned having never seen an injury like this, explaining that the impact had struck her at the base of her love button area, causing the tissue to explode in 3 directions due to the force. The doctor stated that they had repaired everything, but expressed concern about her love button. They conveyed that if it didn't repair itself, it could have an impact on her lovemaking Yuli. I inquired about the details. The doctor explained that the love button area plays a role in stimulating women during lovemaking, contributing to enjoyment and aiding in achieving pleasure peaks. They expressed concern that if the area didn't heal properly, it could make it challenging, if not impossible, for her to experience pleasure peak. The doctor mentioned she would be in recovery for a couple of hours, and then I could visit her. Leaving the hospital a few minutes later, Bill stayed with Sherry there. We stopped for a meal, conversed for a while, and then I went home. On Monday morning around 10 a.m., Sherry called me, asking when I would be visiting Rose. I wasn't sure, possibly tomorrow. Sherry pressed me, and I decided to hang up and turn off my phone. On Tuesday, I entered Rose's room just after lunch. Sherry gave me a disapproving look as I approached the side of Rose's bed. Without giving Rose a chance to speak, I began explaining. I admitted that I aimed to humiliate and embarrass her, wanting everyone to know that she, not me, had caused the end of our marriage. I accused her of lying about being off birth control and being unfaithful. Despite my anger, I emphasized that I never intended or desired any physical damage to befall her. I clarified that, despite being extremely upset, the thought of physically hurting her never crossed my mind. I expressed the hope that she would believe me. Tears streamed down Rose's face, prompting me to turn to leave. However, Rose reached out and grabbed my hand, pleading with me not to go. Rose assured me that she trusted I wouldn't damage her physically. She implored me to stay and talk with her, but I declined, stating that I couldn't. I explained that due to the emotional turmoil caused by her infidelity, my mind and heart were in disarray, leading to a significant mistake at work. While the corporate higher-ups contemplated firing me, my boss, who knew about our marital problems, intervened and prevented them from terminating my employment. As a result, I informed Rose that I would be leaving town for a month. However, I'm facing disciplinary action, again with my boss's assistance. I've been suspended for 30 days without pay. I have a month to address our problems and straighten out my thoughts. My boss has offered me his timeshare in Mexico and allowed me to cash out the 3 weeks of unused vacation. Sherry exclaimed that I couldn't leave Rose because she needed me. I looked at Sherry and explained that I could leave, emphasizing that I couldn't risk losing my job. I mentioned having a great teacher, pointing to Rose, who had taught me to prioritize my job over my marriage. Rose quickly interjected, expressing her apologies. Addressing Rose, there's one more thing. I'm far from finished with your boss. I will make him pay for this, assuring you that a storm is coming for that idiot. My intention is not to bring any repercussions your way. I'm telling you this because I believe he'll throw you under the bus to save himself. The house has been cleaned, all remnants of the party disposed of. On the kitchen table, you'll find materials from the PI and divorce papers for you to sign. Speaking of divorce papers made Rose squeeze my hand hard, hoping I wouldn't be able to pull away as tears flowed again. Rose, I left that material not to cause you more pain, but just in case you can use any of it to protect yourself from your boss. I think, and I hope you get yourself a good lawyer, Rose. Well, I have to get going as I have a plane to catch. Rose insisted that she wouldn't sign the divorce papers until we had a lengthy conversation. I shook my head and conveyed to her that she still didn't understand. I asserted that she was no longer in control, emphasizing that I didn't have to do anything for her. Pulling my hand away, I added that she had messed that up. As I started to walk out, Rose shouted, pleading for me to wait. I stopped and turned toward her. With tears streaming down her face, Rose expressed her profound love for me. She asked if upon my return I would please meet with her. At that moment, Rose, I'll have to say no. It hurts too much just to be here with you. Maybe after I get back, I'll think differently. Bill awaited me outside the hospital to provide transportation to the airport. The ride was quiet, given that Bill was already informed about most of the details surrounding the events and my strategy concerning Rose's boss. I directed him to keep me informed of any developments related to Rose's boss, and he agreed to do so. Additionally, Bill offered to provide updates on Rose's situation. Curious, I inquired about the reason I would want him to keep me updated. Bill chuckled and replied, conveying that I still loved her, which I acknowledged with laughter. I admitted to loving her but emphasized that I couldn't allow anyone to walk over me. Second story. At 32 years old, I am currently in the process of divorcing my 33-year-old wife after discovering that my 5-year-old son is not biologically mine. A couple of weeks ago, I uncovered my wife's infidelity from 6 years ago. Her sister disclosed this information during a visit to discuss the delivery of her first child. According to her sister, my wife admitted to sleeping with her best friend while intoxicated 6 years ago, expressing remorse at that time. Upon learning this, I promptly took a paternity test with my son, fearing the worst. The results, a week later, confirmed that my son is not my biological child. Strangely, I began to perceive the boy differently, more like an acquaintance than a son. Armed with evidence, I confronted my wife at night when the child was sleeping. Despite her inquiries about who told me, I maintained that it was none of her business, even though she would likely connect the dots to her sister. Initiating divorce proceedings left her devastated. Despite her multiple assurances that nothing had happened with anyone else since then, and claims of faithfulness in body and soul, I refrained from insulting her to avoid complications during the divorce, despite my disbelief and blaming of drinks instead of taking responsibility. In our conversation, she threatened to demand full custody of the child. Annoyed, I expressed disinterest in anything not biologically mine, allowing her to keep the child while I would keep our 2 dogs. She attempted to convince me to co-parent, asserting that I am the child's father. In anger, I exploded, yelling at her to go and take her child with her, referring to him as a fool. A week has passed since the incident. I am at home, which is in my name as a gift from my parents. She went to her parents' house with the child and has not contacted me since. My parents support my decision, and my dad believes I did the right thing by not raising someone not of my blood. While currently seeing a therapist 3 times a week, who assures me that leaving behind what causes me pain is the first step, emotional turmoil persists. Writing here for distraction was suggested by my younger brother. My sister-in-law disclosed everything out of guilt, seeing me happy with my son while knowing he might not be mine. The revelation occurred during a moment of weakness when we visited her, causing her to break down with guilt. I harbor tremendous hatred for my wife and conflicting feelings of pain and resentment towards the child. Despite this, I am determined to move forward. I hope the divorce proceeds smoothly since we have separate finances and properties. If she seeks child support, I have proof of the child's paternity, which according to my lawyer should suffice in any legal process. My therapist advises against seeing either the child or my wife, emphasizing the importance of focusing on my well-being first. The child is no longer my responsibility, and accepting this reality is crucial for my emotional recovery. Update. Not much of significance has occurred, but here's a brief summary about 3 days after my post. My ex visited my house and requested entry. I went out to meet her at the door, stating firmly that she wouldn't set foot in my house while I'm present. If she had anything to say, it should be at the door. She practically begged me to take her son back, acknowledging that cutting off all contact was my prerogative. She expressed that she deserved it, but raising a child alone would jeopardize her dream of becoming a notary. Working in public records, she's 2 years away from pursuing a vacancy in the judiciary to achieve her notary goal. I tried to explain calmly that my therapist recommended cutting off all contact with both of them, asking her to leave before I lose my composure. Despite my love for the child, I won't direct my anger at an innocent, especially one born out of her actions. I expressed this with some anger, but I never raised my voice since we were on the street, emphasizing that the child deserves better, and she is currently responsible for providing that. Afterward, we talked a bit more. She resisted the urge to cry or make a scene, considering we were on the street, and she values others' opinions. The last thing she asked was to at least let her see the dogs. I declined, believing it's best for them to get used to her absence. Seeing her after so much time would only make them euphoric. After that, she nodded and left. 2 days later, she called me upon receiving the divorce papers. My mistake was answering, and after about 30 minutes of yelling, I directed her to contact my civil lawyer for any questions. I then silenced her number. She hasn't come to my house or tried to call again. On the same day, I contacted a friend for my master's degree and suggested going out. She accepted, and we've been going out since then. Finally, last Friday, I proposed being an exclusive couple, which she accepted. She has stayed overnight at my house for a few days, already familiar with and adoring my dogs. I appreciate this, since I couldn't start something with someone who doesn't accept my pets. We are currently taking things easy. She understands the drama I am having with my ex and the child, respecting my decision. She asked if I will ever have contact with the child again. I told her maybe when he is of age to understand my decisions, but I don't expect it to interfere with my life in the future. She nodded, glad that I prioritized myself during this process. Maybe this took a little longer than I expected, but this is the summary of what happened these days and update. Well, to put it plainly, I'm now officially divorced. In my country, there's a streamlined divorce process known as a quick divorce, applicable when there are no shared assets, joint finances, or children involved. This type of divorce takes place at the municipal level, bypassing the judicial proceedings that typically include reconciliation, asset distribution, and more. As you might have guessed, the sole complication was our shared son. The matter of the paternity test arose, confirming that the child isn't mine, and my name was successfully removed from his birth certificate, leaving him with both of his mother's last names. Describing the divorce process as challenging is an understatement. My ex-wife attempted multiple times to exploit our child's mental state to lure me back, but recollecting everything that transpired helped me stay focused. Gratitude is due to my current partner, who consistently supported me. While I understand it's not my fault, hearing it from her also played a role in helping me. After numerous discussions involving our lawyers, I proposed covering half of a nanny's salary for her son while she gets her life back on track. Fortunately, she agreed to cover the remaining expenses entirely on her own. I made it clear that I wouldn't be taking care of her son, and she agreed. Being devoted to her work, adapting to single motherhood seems to have been a significant shock for her. Out of curiosity, I asked if she spoke with the child's father. She tried, and he even lived with them for 2 weeks at her parents' house, but they simply had nothing in common, leading to conflicts. She had to intervene to prevent them from shouting at each other, and after a couple of weeks, he left her home. While somewhat sad, she is a woman with a good job and figure. With a year of nanny assistance, she has ample time to find a suitable stepfather for her son. Meanwhile, I don't plan to talk to him yet, perhaps in a couple of years or when he's a teenager. If the child doesn't wish to talk to me, I won't insist, understanding if he harbors resentment. Discussing the child led to her expressing hatred towards me, particularly for having a new partner quickly. I found it rude, especially since my current partner was present and I had to intervene in an argument between the two. Despite signing the divorce papers and acknowledging my help, she couldn't bear that. Throughout the conversation, I maintained a compassionate demeanor. She has always been proud, achieving everything through her merit, and my look seemed to hurt and anger her. I clarified that it was the same look as always. If she has a paranoia problem, it's not my concern. The important thing is she signed the papers and I can finally move on with my life. For a year, I'll be paying half the minimum wage for a nanny, a fair price for peace. Despite harboring negative feelings, I accepted it and moved forward this month. Yes, I still resent her, but not enough to express it directly or wish her ill. She has enough problems to deal with. I appreciate my current partner for enduring all this more than once. I told her she didn't have to accompany me or worry about it, but she insists that my problems are hers too, and I shouldn't carry the burden alone. It has been a tremendous help in lightening my load. She also understands my reluctance to rush into marriage this year, or possibly the next, and I appreciate her understanding. At least this chapter of my life is about to close without long-term consequences for me. Third story. Married for 16 years, together for 20, and parents of 3 children. Uncovered her affair by hacking her phone and reading messages. She engaged in an affair with a coworker, terminated it, and attempted to repair our marriage. Unsuccessful. Divorce filed October 2018. She moved out November 2018 and promptly resumed her relationship with her affair partner. Divorce concluded December 2019, and she remained with her affair partner until last week. Tearfully, my ex called, asking if I could take the kids overnight. Concerned, I inquired about what was wrong. She replied that karma had struck her hard. Sensing something awry, she went through her affair partner's phone while he was in the shower, discovering an extensive string of explicit Facebook messages, akin to how I discovered her affair. My ex is 39, he is 52, and his new affair partner is a married 28-year-old. Now, don't get me wrong. I initially wanted to celebrate this turn of events. From the beginning, I warned her that the guy was a beast of prey. However, after hearing her out, I realized she was genuinely in love with him, and part of me felt sorry for her. Ironically, she apologized more on that day than ever before for the pain she caused me, expressing remorse for the hurt I endured. Taking it with a grain of salt, I've moved on and found happiness with someone else over the last 6 months. Update. There was nearly a second instance of infidelity with the affair partner, AP, but my ex caught him before they could arrange a meeting. She has complete control over his phone, monitoring all his apps and checking his messages constantly. It sounds like a nightmare to me. My ex and the AP still have a peculiar on and off relationship. Let me delve into that a bit. Officially, they are not together. According to her, both of their Facebook pages are listed as single. She occasionally wears his engagement ring, and I'm pretty sure she would return it, unlike her refusal with my $12,000 wedding ring. She stays at his apartment occasionally, but claims they just hang out as friends. Why? Because don't we all spend the night at our ex's place, sleep in their bed, and just hang out? I'm still amused that she thinks everyone is naive like that. Meanwhile, she had to change jobs because of her close friendship with the plant manager at her previous workplace. They were always talking, going to lunch, taking Harley rides, walks on breaks, etc. Rumors started flying and things got messy there. Her work friend is married with 3 kids. He still visits her on occasion and takes her on a Harley ride to a movie or whatever. She was apparently caught by our teenage son kissing someone in the driveway. Our son didn't know who this person was and called me to ask. I told him to ask his mother who that was and played dumb. He was under the impression that she and the AP were still together because he was just over the day before, grilling out and mowing her lawn. Another new guy appears. She won't disclose how or where she met him. They went on 2 dates, and she didn't seem into him. They knew each other from a previous job, and he kept saying how he wanted to be with all her friends and coworkers back in the day. We were talking the other day about retirement. She knows my plan is to semi-retire in 6 years. As soon as I'm done with child support and all of my kids are 18, I plan to relocate south to a warmer climate. She gave me a sob story about how she had to raise all of our children while I built a business, and how she'll probably have to work till she's dead and never retire. That is so far from the truth. I put in just as much time, housework, and effort into our family as she did for a few years. I did even more than her while she was out partying with her friends 4 or 5 nights a week. My response to her was, "You made your choice to leave me and go with your AP." Her facial response was glorious to see. I was her retirement plan. She now has a whopping $14,000 in her $401,000 for retirement, and she is in her early 40s. Even if she stays or goes back or whatever she is doing with her AP, he makes okay money, has no savings, little retirement, and doesn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. So there is some karma in that. My thought to pass on to all of you going through a divorce or on the verge of one is this. My life was torn apart from October 2018 to December 2019 when our divorce was final. Fast forward a few years to now, and I'm happier than I have ever been. I am looking to retire early and enjoy some beach time. My relationship with my kids has never been stronger or better. When things look so dark and terrible, be a good person. Don't lie or deceive. Don't try to be malicious or involve the kids. Between you and him, Dar, or her, keep your head up and keep walking. The farther you can walk away from the darkness, the better your life will be. Stay strong, my friends. You got this.
Story 4.
The early morning was quiet, with tides lapping at the shore. Years of wandering had brought me to this place, where I started each day with a run along the coast, letting go of the past. Life hadn't always been solitary. My family had been my anchor, but cracks forced me to rebuild alone. Now, I lived in sync with the waves. The day's plan was simple: a run, a shower, and college football. San Diego State played in the morning, USC in the afternoon. After an 8-mile run, I cleared my head and enjoyed La Jolla's warmth while much of the country faced snow. After a shower, I headed to Tequila Joe's, where San Diego State had already scored. The bar's big screens and good food made it my favorite spot. Vivian, the friendly waitress, greeted me with her usual warmth. San Diego State played well with smooth plays and strong defense. I finished my chicken salad and ordered another beer. As the team neared another touchdown, a man walked in, heading straight for me. I didn't notice him until he stood in front of me, and I looked up, startled to see him. "Hi, Dad," he said. The words hit me like a blow. There was a time when hearing them filled me with indescribable joy, but those days were far behind me. Now they stung. I studied him briefly, trying to connect the grown man before me with the boy I once knew. He wasn't a child anymore. Not by a long shot. James was over 21 now. It had been 5 years since I'd last seen him. Back then, he was an awkward, lanky 16-year-old just beginning to shave. Now he stood taller, broader, and with a muscular frame. He had grown into a man during my absence. "Hello, James," I replied, keeping my tone composed. "Why?" he demanded, his voice trembling with anger. I had played out this moment in my mind countless times, rehearsing what to say if we ever met again. But now, faced with James, I was blank. His anger was unmistakable, clenched fists, white-knuckled fury in his eyes. I stayed seated knowing standing might provoke him. I felt a deep, bitter regret for the pain I'd caused him and his brothers over the past 5 years. The only words I could muster were the truth. "I'm not your dad." His voice rose, bewildered. "What?" "I assume you're asking why I left you, your brothers, and your mom. The reason is simple. I'm not your father." The tension in his fists eased, but his face showed shock and confusion. The revelation was shattering his understanding of the past, much like it had destroyed mine years ago. I guided him into a chair, and as his world began to unravel, I called for 2 beers. This wasn't how I had imagined sharing a drink with the boy I once thought was my son. "How?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. I looked him in the eye. "It started in high school. Your mother, Sandy, and I met in science class. She was the new girl, and we quickly became inseparable. She was beautiful, smart, and kind. Over the years, we fell deeply in love. By the time we graduated, I was heading to MIT, and she enrolled at Boston College so we could stay together. We moved to Boston, struggled through school, and built a life. We were young and wildly in love." I paused to let him absorb the history before continuing. "After graduation, we moved back to Denver, got married, and started our life together. I landed a job in aeronautical engineering, and she worked in medical billing. Our first years were busy but happy. Then Sandy got pregnant. When you were born, I was overjoyed. You were perfect, and I poured myself into providing for our family." James was silent, absorbing every word. "With a new baby, things were hectic, but we managed. Sandy got pregnant again, and we moved to a larger house in the suburbs before your brother Caleb arrived. Life was chaotic with 2 young kids, but I thought we were happy. I had no idea something was wrong until 5 years ago." I stopped, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. That's when I learned the truth. Sandy had been unfaithful more than once. A paternity test confirmed what I didn't want to believe. Neither you nor your brother was mine. James stared at me, his world crumbling further. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't know how," I admitted. "You were kids, and I couldn't bring myself to destroy the only sense of family you knew. So I left, thinking it was better for all of us. But I see now that leaving caused even more pain." Vivian brought the beers, and we sat in heavy silence. The truth was out, but it felt like cold comfort. After Caleb was born, Sandy and I decided she wouldn't return to work. She kept in touch with her friends and occasionally went out, but within a year she was pregnant again. Eric arrived, and a year later, Daniel followed. By the time Daniel was born, you were 4. 4 boys felt like enough, and Sandy had her tubes tied. With 4 kids, intimacy between us became strained, but I didn't mind. I thought we were happy. Our small home quickly became cramped, so we moved to a house in Aurora with a spacious yard for you boys to play in. As time went on, I noticed subtle things about Sandy. She always referred to you as her boys, never ours, which stung more than I cared to admit. At social events, she'd dismiss my work, telling people I drew planes for a living. I didn't correct her, partly to avoid embarrassing her, but also because my work was classified. Still, it hurt. My career was demanding. I led a design team developing a stealth fighter, and with tensions brewing in the Middle East, the Air Force pressed hard for results. Despite my workload, I prioritized family. I never missed a Little League game, even coaching some of your teams. Balancing work and fatherhood with 4 kids wasn't easy, but I made it work. When Daniel started school, Sandy had more free time and threw herself into volunteering. She worked with organizations like the Breast Cancer Society and the Library Foundation, creating a new social circle and filling her days. Life seemed good. My stealth fighter debuted during the Gulf War, earning global acclaim. You boys were thriving in sports and activities, and Sandy appeared fulfilled. But under the surface, cracks were forming. Looking back, I see how Sandy occasionally tried to create distance between me and you boys. She signed you all up for different activities, baseball, football, volleyball, and music, ensuring I was spread thin. Daniel's musical talent stood out, though. It amazed me, as neither Sandy nor I were musical. I joked once that maybe the postman was a musician, and Sandy just smiled. Then everything unraveled. I turned 40 and the Air Force required a physical. The tests were routine until the doctor discovered something unusual during an exam. Concerned, he referred me to a specialist. When the medical community moves fast, you know it's serious. I endured more tests, and while relieved it wasn't cancer, the specialist blindsided me with an unexpected question. When did you become sterile? Confused, I insisted I wasn't sterile. I had 4 sons. The doctor politely disagreed. Shocked and disbelieving, I sought second, third, and fourth opinions. They all confirmed the same thing. I was sterile, likely due to a motorcycle accident at 14. Devastation doesn't begin to describe how I felt. I needed answers, so I took all 4 of you to the doctor under the guise of flu shots. Instead, I ordered DNA tests. 2 weeks later, the results confirmed my worst fears. Not only were none of you biologically mine, but each of you had a different father. My world shattered. I spent that night drowning in scotch at a bar, trying to process the betrayal and lies. The next morning, I tried to function but couldn't. My team at work noticed and sent me home. That evening, Sandy prepared dinner, completely unaware of what I'd learned. I sat across from her, replaying every moment of our life together through a new lens. The woman I loved now seemed like a stranger. Overwhelmed, I excused myself and vomited. I purged not just the meal, but the life I thought I had. Sandy tried to comfort me, but I pushed her away, retreating to the spare bedroom to cry through the night. By morning, I knew I couldn't stay. I quit my job, emptied half of our savings, and left a simple note on the table. I know. Then I got in my truck and drove east, aimlessly chasing escape. I reached the Atlantic Ocean in Maine, where I contemplated ending it all, staring at the waves and imagining how far I could swim before giving up. But even at my lowest, I couldn't do it. I couldn't leave you boys without answers as much as I hated Sandy. For months, I drifted down the East Coast, taking odd jobs to survive. I worked as a dishwasher, a fry cook, and even a tram driver at Disney World. In Atlanta, while working at an auto shop, the FBI found me. Apparently, the government doesn't appreciate it when someone with top-secret clearance vanishes. The agents weren't hostile, just concerned. They questioned why I left, but I gave them a vague answer about marital issues. They didn't press further, only reminding me of my confidentiality agreements. One agent offered a quiet apology before they left, acknowledging my pain without saying the words. And then they were gone, leaving me to piece together what was left of my life. Work had become my refuge after my life unraveled. Back at the shop, Al handed me a brake job, but I could tell he didn't trust me anymore. A week later, I left. From then on, I suspected the feds were keeping tabs on me, occasionally sending someone to check in. They likely wanted reassurance that I wasn't revealing classified information, but sharing secrets, or even speaking to anyone, was far from my mind. I was broken, and people seemed to sense it, giving me space. I wandered the East Coast for a year before heading west. New Orleans, Houston, Kansas City, Phoenix, and finally, the Pacific. My days were filled with fleeting jobs, endless thinking, and too many tears. I replayed every moment of my past with Sandy, looking for signs I had missed, clues hidden in plain sight. I remembered coworkers, James, Caleb, Susan's boyfriend Daniel, and felt the crushing weight of their names. Each memory deepened the betrayal. On the West Coast, amidst the chaos in my mind, I found solace in the sunsets. Every evening, I watched the sun dip into the ocean, each one unique and strangely healing. Slowly, I began piecing myself back together. Answers never came, but I started to accept that they might not. In Seattle, while working as a waiter in a family restaurant, life took an unexpected turn. One afternoon, 2 men came in, looking every bit the engineers with their pocket protectors and blueprints. I noticed their jet design, a small executive aircraft, and casually pointed out a flaw in the air intake. They were startled by my observation, and I sketched a quick adjustment on a napkin, calculating how it could improve performance. Speechless, they left with my unsolicited advice but returned the next day with a man named Brad Linsky. He confirmed my suggestions were accurate and asked to talk. Reluctantly, I agreed. Brad and his partners were developing a new jet, and my insights had impressed them. After days of hesitation, I decided to hear them out. Soon I found myself flying to San Diego in their jet, reviewing designs and offering more improvements. Brad was persistent, and before I knew it, I was signing on as a partner in their project. For the first time in years, I felt purpose return. My ideas shaped the aircraft, some even earning patents, and our work gained attention from major players like Airbus and Boeing. Licensing deals brought in royalties, and my life, once shattered, began to rebuild. I bought a house on the beach where I could watch the sunsets that had become my therapy. Work consumed me, helping me escape the loneliness that lingered. For 5 years, I kept everyone at arm's length. Then James walked into my life, bringing the past I had buried crashing back. He sat across from me in a dimly lit sports bar, his face etched with pain. As I recounted everything, my discoveries, the betrayal, and my failures, he listened in stunned silence. When I finished, he looked older, burdened by truths he hadn't expected to hear. His tears mirrored my own as he stood to leave. Before walking out, he hugged me, an embrace filled with raw emotion. That night, I sat in a daze, unsure of what to do next. The memories of Sandy remained a blurry, painful history I tried to suppress. But the boys? They were different. I'd failed them. They weren't my biological sons, but I had been their father, and I abandoned them when they needed me most. Forgiving myself felt impossible. James asked if we could talk again tomorrow. I said yes. As he left, I felt a glimmer of hope, though uncertainty loomed. After he was gone, Vivian, the bartender, approached with 2 beers. She admitted she'd overheard everything and hugged me tightly, her tears joining mine. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And for a moment, I didn't feel entirely alone. My entire world fractured in an instant. "You're not my son," reverberated endlessly in my head, overshadowing every word that followed. I heard the rest of his story, but those 4 words defined everything. My identity, my origins, everything I believed about my life was obliterated. Tears burned my face as I stumbled out of the restaurant, numb and desperate for the solitude of my hotel room. At a small hotel in Pacific Beach, I tried to piece together the day's events. It was impossible. I wanted the life I'd known, but I understood it was gone. For 5 years, I had been the de facto father figure for my brothers, a role I couldn't abandon. Yet as I lay there, memories attacked me. Every Little League game, every family dinner. Every night he held my head when I was sick. This man, whose blood I didn't share, had been my father in every way that mattered. Sorrow consumed me until sleep mercifully overtook the pain. Morning came cold and unforgiving. The brisk Pacific air offered no clarity. I dressed quickly and headed to his house, walking the few miles that felt endless. When I arrived, he opened the door before the bell finished ringing. He invited me in, but I declined. "I heard everything you said," I began, "but I have questions, and I need answers. I'm heading home today, and I have to figure out what to do next." His eyes held the weight of regret. "What will you tell your brothers?" "Your mother?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted truthfully. I wasn't ready to face those conversations. There was a heavy silence between us. I broke it. "Whoever my biological father is, he's irrelevant. You raised me. You're my dad. You always have been." My voice cracked and tears followed. He pulled me into an embrace, his strength anchoring me as we both wept. "I want to be back in your lives," he said softly. "But I can't face your mother. That pain is too deep. Every memory feels tainted. I don't know how to start." We moved to the kitchen, where he poured 2 cups of coffee. We sat in silence, staring at the waves beyond the patio. "You're right," I said finally. "Mom hurt you. She hurt all of us. But she's still my mom, and you're still my dad. My brothers and I need you in our lives, no matter how complicated this is. We'll figure it out." I saw something shift in him then. The burden he'd carried visibly lifted, and he seemed to stand taller. His hug was crushing, his emotions raw. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I left with hope, but also uncertainty. The road ahead would be anything but simple. The drive west had been long and full of reflection, but heading home was different. Memories flooded back, especially the day everything changed. I was 16, arriving home early from school. My routine was simple: drop my bag by the stairs, raid the fridge, and drink milk straight from the carton when no one was watching. That day, though, I saw a note on the kitchen table. In Dad's handwriting, it read, "I know." I didn't understand what it meant, so I left it there. Figuring I'd find out when Mom and Dad got home, I went to watch a rerun of The Simpsons before starting homework. But the peace didn't last. A piercing cry echoed through the house. I rushed downstairs to find Mom crumpled on the floor, clutching the note to her chest. Her sobs were primal, guttural. I tried to help her, but she was inconsolable. I managed to guide her to the bedroom where she curled around Dad's pillow, trembling. "Where's Dad?" I asked, desperate for answers. "He had to leave," she whispered through tears. "He had to go." I didn't know what to do. Caleb and Daniel were playing in the yard, oblivious to the chaos. Eric wouldn't be home until dinner. Mom asked me to make mac and cheese for my brothers, so I did. Around the table, the conversation was light. Video games, school fights, basketball schedules. No one mentioned Mom's absence or Dad's sudden departure. Later that evening, I tried calling Dad. He didn't answer. My heart sank as I left a voicemail, begging him to call back. He never did. The next morning, Mom looked hollow. She told me to get ready for school and promised we'd talk that evening. I didn't press her, but unease settled deep in my chest. That night, when she finally explained that Dad had left and wasn't coming back, our lives shifted forever. Now, driving home from San Diego, I couldn't shake the weight of those memories. Dad had been everything to us, even when he left. Now I had to figure out how to rebuild the bridge between him and my brothers. The road ahead seemed endless, but for the first time, I felt like there was a chance to mend what had been broken. All day, I dreaded the inevitable conversation waiting at home. I couldn't focus in class or recall a single thing any teacher said. By the time the final bell rang, I bolted straight home, hoping to find answers, but fearing the worst. When I arrived, Aunt Lauren was there. Though not a blood relative, she was a close friend of Mom's, and her presence was a bad sign. She was tidying up, washing dishes, and moving through the house as if she belonged there. Without a word, I headed upstairs, passing Mom's closed bedroom door, and collapsed on my bed. Tears came unbidden, a slow trickle down my cheeks. I could hear my brothers arrive, their laughter mingling with the familiar hum of the Xbox. How could they not sense the dread hanging over us? Dinner came too soon. Aunt Lauren called us to the table where she had set out a meal. Mom appeared moments later. She looked fragile, as if she had barely held herself together long enough to make it downstairs. Her silence was deafening. She sat in her usual seat, but there was no plate set for Dad. As we ate, the usual sibling banter, teasing, joking, and petty arguments was absent. An unspoken understanding settled over us. Nothing would ever be the same. I kept glancing at Mom, who barely touched her food, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Halfway through the meal, she spoke. She began with a strained confession. She admitted to a mistake so painful that Dad had left, his anger too great for reconciliation. Her words were heavy with guilt, and her message was clear. We were not to blame, nor was Dad. The fault, she insisted, was hers alone. As her words sank in, the table fell silent. I heard quiet sobs from my brothers, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them. Mom abruptly excused herself, retreating upstairs, and the rest of us sat in stunned silence. Plates remained half full as my brothers scattered to grieve in their own ways. Aunt Lauren stayed behind, clearing the table and washing dishes. Out of habit, I joined her, drying plates as she washed. In a quiet, steady voice, she turned to me and said I would have to take on more responsibility as the eldest. She emphasized how much my brothers and Mom would need me. Nodding silently, I agreed, though I couldn't help but wonder who would be there for me. That dinner marked the beginning of our family's slow unraveling. Mom, who once volunteered at the Cancer Society, announced the following week that she had taken a paying job. It wasn't much, she said, and we'd have to tighten our belts. Money became an ongoing concern. In less than 6 months, our lives changed drastically. There were no more video games, no more dinners at restaurants, no more small indulgences like chips or soda. I quit after-school sports and got a part-time job at Denny's, bussing tables and refilling drinks. The modest paycheck I earned was split among my brothers, softening the blow for them but stretching me thin. Each of us dealt with Dad's absence in our own way. Caleb poured himself into academics, determined to make Dad proud if he ever came back. Eric channeled his energy into sports, becoming an all-star athlete but sacrificing any semblance of a social life. Daniel, however, drifted. At first, he found solace in his guitar, but by 13, he began falling in with the wrong crowd. By 14, I was certain he was smoking pot, coming home with bloodshot eyes and a defiant attitude. I tried to intervene, but he met me with anger, yelling that I wasn't his father. It stung, but I didn't have the tools to help him. My own guilt weighed heavily, consuming my thoughts. I worked long hours, but it was never enough. Mom continued to withdraw, working exhausting hours and retreating to her room each night. The vibrant woman she once was faded, replaced by someone pale, tired, and burdened by regret. Aunt Lauren visited occasionally, but the warmth and laughter of our home were gone. Blame crept into our family dynamic. Caleb and Eric eventually turned their anger toward Dad, resenting his inability to forgive Mom. Daniel, on the other hand, directed his anger at her, their relationship deteriorating into constant conflict. I found myself stuck in the middle, trying to keep the peace while struggling with my own resentment toward both of them. By the time I turned 19, I decided to search for Dad. Mom claimed she hadn't found him, but I suspected she had tried. My efforts were sporadic, combing through online records and articles that mentioned his name. Then, one day, I found a clue. A race listing for the San Diego Half Marathon matched his name and age, with La Jolla listed as his residence. A background photo of the race crowd revealed someone who looked like him. With that lead, I decided to track him down. My family was at a crossroads, and I held the key to unraveling or healing the wounds that had defined us for years. As I made my way back from San Diego, the weight of what I'd discovered pressed heavily on me. The truth could shift my brother's resentment toward Mom, who was barely holding on. I didn't know how to move forward, but I knew it was my burden to carry. Stopping for the night at a small motel, I tried to sleep, but the questions and doubts kept me awake. By morning, I was back on the road, each mile bringing me closer to home and the reckoning that awaited. The restaurant where I worked was a revolving door of young staff, but somehow I managed to stick around the longest. 8 months earlier, a new waitress named Vanessa Brown was hired. She was stunning with an infectious energy that drew everyone in. Despite her popularity, she gravitated toward me, and we quickly struck up a friendship. Balancing school, work, and family left me little time for anything else. But one night after a shift, I impulsively asked her to grab coffee. To my surprise, she agreed. That night at Starbucks turned into hours of conversation, the first of many coffee dates. Within weeks, we were spending most of our free time together. Eventually, I asked her on a proper date, and from there, our relationship blossomed. Months later, Vanessa invited me to her place while her roommate was out. That night, I lost my pureness to her and assumed she'd done the same. Our connection deepened, or so I thought. By the time we hit our 5-month anniversary, I gave her a promise ring, which she accepted with enthusiasm, declaring her love for me. For a while, I believed I was truly happy. But happiness is fragile. 8 months into our relationship, I picked up an extra shift at the restaurant, only for it to end early when the original waitress returned. Excited to surprise Vanessa, I headed to her apartment. Passing her window, I froze at the sight of her kissing Simon Joyner, our morning manager. My heart sank. When Vanessa opened the door, her shock was evident. She stammered, trying to explain, but I didn't want to hear it. Calmly, I asked for my ring back, removing it from her hand myself. I told her to forget I ever existed and walked away, shattered. That night, I packed a bag and left for San Diego, chasing the leads I had on my father, hoping the distance would help me process the betrayal. Returning home from San Diego days later, I kept my trip vague during dinner with my family, casually mentioning visits to tourist attractions and potential schools for my younger brothers. When Mom asked about Vanessa, I told her the truth. Her reaction was immediate. She fled the table in tears. My brothers teased me, but I was lost in thought, unable to shake the parallels between Vanessa's betrayal and Mom's infidelity. Both had destroyed the trust they were given, though Mom's actions had torn apart an entire family. Determined to help my brothers escape the weight of our home life, I suggested Caleb and Eric consider San Diego State University. Caleb could transfer as a junior, and Eric could start as a freshman. Initially, they resisted, hesitant to leave Mom and Daniel behind. Eric warmed up to the idea quickly, but Caleb was reluctant, questioning my insistence on San Diego. Frustrated, I finally revealed the truth. Dad was there. The news stunned them. A flurry of questions followed. Where he was, why he left, and whether they could see him. I explained how I had found him after Vanessa and I broke up and that I'd been in contact with him ever since. Dad was supportive of their move to San Diego, but didn't want Mom to know. The plan gained momentum, and we framed it as a school visit during winter break. Mom was supportive, but clearly uneasy about the idea. On the day they left, she hugged them tightly, unaware they were staying at Dad's house. Daniel and I watched them drive off, unsure what the trip would bring. Over the next few days, Caleb and Eric called regularly, sounding happier than I'd heard them in years. They raved about San Diego's beauty, the university, and the person helping them with their applications. Dad. When they returned home, their excitement was palpable. Both had applied to SDSU, confident scholarships and financial aid would make it possible. That night, as we gathered for pizza, they shared stories from their trip. While Mom smiled and listened, I could see the tension behind her eyes. She knew something had shifted but didn't ask. As my brothers talked about their plans, I couldn't help but wonder how this new chapter would affect our family, and whether it might finally bring some healing. Life seemed to unravel in slow motion after Mom left the table that evening, retreating to her room as she often did. Daniel disappeared as well, leaving Caleb, Eric, and me alone. That privacy allowed Caleb and Eric to open up about their time with Dad. They described how emotional their reunion had been, their decision to stay in San Diego after school ended, and their choice to let Dad's version of events lie, sparing Mom further pain. The months leading up to their departure were bittersweet. Caleb excelled academically, and Eric shone in sports, earning recognition for his achievements. Amid their preparations, no one seemed to notice Daniel's increasing withdrawal or Mom's worsening state. I knew Daniel had moved on to harder pills, and my attempts at intervention were met with anger and defiance. Mom, though aware, seemed powerless to help. Her health visibly declined. She was thinner, her energy waning, and her once lustrous hair now dull. Just after Christmas, Daniel disappeared for 3 days. Police found him in a pills house, dazed and strung out. We placed him in a rehab center, but he fought the process every step of the way. During a family session, Daniel unleashed his fury at Mom, blaming her for Dad's absence and the family's disintegration. Her tears didn't stop him. If anything, they fueled his anger. In a trembling voice, she took responsibility, asking him to channel his pain into healing rather than self-destruction. By the time Caleb and Eric left for San Diego in June, the house felt emptier than ever. They settled quickly, excited for a fresh start and the chance to reconnect with Dad. I planned to visit them in August, but the trip was cut short when I received a devastating call from Mom. Daniel had overdosed and was in the ICU. Rushing back, I found Mom at Daniel's bedside, broken and exhausted. She blamed herself for not being able to save him. That night, Dad arrived unannounced, guilt heavy in his voice as he took responsibility for his absence. We discussed a plan to move Daniel to a rehab facility in San Diego, where being near his brothers and away from Mom might aid his recovery. Dad arranged everything, including the private jet to transport Daniel. The following day, as Mom and I prepared for Daniel's transfer, she insisted I go with him. She argued that as the family's anchor, Daniel needed me to guide him through recovery. Despite my protests, I was on the plane the next morning. Daniel's transition to the San Diego facility was smoother than expected, and over the next few weeks, progress was slow but steady. Family therapy sessions became pivotal. Daniel began to open up, admitting how much he missed Dad and wished for reconciliation. When the therapist asked what he'd say to his father if he could, Daniel tearfully expressed forgiveness and a longing to reunite. At that moment, Dad walked into the room. Daniel's initial shock gave way to overwhelming emotion as he fell to his knees, sobbing. Dad embraced him, and soon, Caleb, Eric, and I joined in. It felt like a long-lost piece of our family had returned. Therapy continued to address Daniel's obsession and our fractured family dynamics, but one glaring issue remained unspoken. Mom. Dad couldn't bring himself to confront her, and I had no idea how to bridge the gap. I kept Mom updated on Daniel's progress, but withheld any mention of Dad's involvement. 2 months into Daniel's recovery, I decided it was time to visit Mom. She dismissed the idea, insisting Daniel needed me more. Though reluctant, I respected her wishes, but began quietly planning a trip home. Before I could finalize anything, Aunt Lauren called with news that shattered me. Mom was gone. Her death brought an abrupt, devastating end to the fragile threads holding us together, leaving me grappling with the weight of unfinished conversations, unresolved pain, and a family forever altered. The cold mountain air pierced through me as we stood at the graveside. A small group gathered for Mom's final farewell. Her resting place was nestled among the trees, with a view of the distant peaks. She would have loved the peacefulness of it. My brothers, Eric, Caleb, Daniel, and I stood side by side, each of us engulfed in our grief. Mom's only brother had managed to attend, offering quiet support as we endured the ceremony in the bitter Colorado winter. Dad attended too, but he remained at a distance, standing silently in the background. After the service, we received condolences from Mom's coworkers and a few remaining friends. Her circle had grown small in the years since Dad left. As the eldest, I had handled most of the arrangements, but Mom had planned much of it in advance, leaving detailed instructions. Aunt Lauren was the last to leave the cemetery. She hugged each of us tightly, her tears flowing freely. When she reached me, she pulled me aside and handed me 2 envelopes. "Your mother wanted you to have these after she passed," she said. "She wouldn't let me tell anyone she was sick. Please call me after you read them." I tucked the letters into my pocket without looking and thanked her. Mom's death had blindsided us. None of us knew she had cancer. Reflecting on the past few months, I realized she had seemed unwell, tired, thinner, but I had attributed it to the stress of Daniel's struggles. Guilt gnawed at me. I should have seen the signs. The call from Aunt Lauren that night had turned my world upside down. When I told Dad and my brothers the news, the room fell silent, then erupted with tears and denial. Daniel broke down first, saying it couldn't be true. Dad pulled him into a hug, and soon we were all clinging to one another, grieving the loss of the woman who had held our family together through so much. Dad immediately arranged for us to fly back to Colorado. By the early hours of the morning, we arrived at the house. Aunt Lauren greeted us, offering her condolences and helping us settle in. Dad opted to stay at a hotel, saying he couldn't face staying in the house. The days that followed were a whirlwind of phone calls, funeral preparations, and quiet moments of reflection. The service was small, just family and a few friends. Afterward, we returned to the house for a quiet meal prepared by Lauren. That evening, we sat in the living room, wrapped in our thoughts. Lauren gently guided the conversation, asking questions that encouraged us to share memories of Mom. Her skillful approach helped break the silence and began to ease some of our pain. Dad remained mostly silent, though I caught Lauren's pleading glances toward him. He stayed distant, his emotions carefully guarded. After everyone retired for the night, I went to my room. As I removed my coat, I found the 2 envelopes Lauren had given me. Both were addressed to me in Mom's handwriting, with one marked, "Open me first." I sat on my bed, hesitated, then unfolded the first letter. Mom's words hit me like a tidal wave. She admitted to hiding her illness and confessed to carrying secrets that had shaped and shattered our family. Her letter detailed her gratitude for the life we shared, but also her profound regret for the lies that had tainted it. She wrote about her childhood in Oklahoma, her close-knit family, and the moment everything changed, a traumatic event that cast a shadow over her life. She revealed that when she was 14, she fell while climbing a tree and was injured. Her Uncle Jack, who was responsible for watching the children that day, attacked her under the pretense of caring for her injuries. She described the fear, confusion, and helplessness she felt, and how that experience shaped her choices and relationships, including those with Dad and us. As I read, waves of anger, sorrow, and understanding washed over me. Mom's pain had been hidden behind her strength, her secrets woven into the fabric of our family's story. This letter was her final attempt to unburden herself and pass that truth to me, trusting me to carry it forward. I folded the letter and set it aside, unable to open the second one yet. Exhaustion and emotion overwhelmed me. I knew this was just the beginning of uncovering a story I hadn't been prepared to face, but I also realized it might be the key to understanding her, our family, and how to move forward in the aftermath of her loss. Afterward, Uncle Jack told me never to tell anyone, insisting it was my fault for climbing the tree and getting hurt. He said people would blame me. I cried myself to sleep every night for a week, my parents none the wiser. They assumed my tears were from the injuries, and the bruises from his hands blended in with the ones from the fall. They never suspected anything. For the next year, Uncle Jack continued to offense me. I avoided playing with my cousins, but my brothers often forced me to join them. My parents thought I was being difficult and left me under his care. The offense happened nearly every month, with the family remaining close to Uncle Jack and his children. It wasn't until a year later that my father caught him. Dad came home early from work and found Uncle Jack attacking me in my bedroom. The rage in my father's eyes was something I'd never seen before. He pulled Uncle Jack off me and unleashed a flurry of punches, leaving Jack bloodied and unconscious. I sat frozen, shocked and exposed. An ambulance took Jack to the hospital, and the police came to investigate. The incident tore our family apart. Despite the evidence, many relatives sided with Jack, urging my father to forgive him and drop the charges. My dad refused. He gave the family an ultimatum: either support us and ensure Jack went to jail, or never speak to him again. When they tried to negotiate, Dad stood firm. Jack went to jail, and we moved to Colorado, severing all ties with Dad's family. Although my father's actions protected me, they didn't erase the damage. I carried the weight of guilt, not only for what Jack had done, but for tearing apart Dad's family. I felt broken, unworthy, and convinced no boy could ever truly want me. When I met your father in school, I was terrified of boys. Therapy helped me manage the trauma, but the fear lingered. He was different, patient, kind, and never pushed me into anything I wasn't ready for. We became close, supporting each other through our weaknesses. Over time, I fell in love with him. He asked me to homecoming, and I decided to give myself to him that night. The week leading up to it was a battle with doubt. I hadn't been touched by anyone since Uncle Jack, and the thought terrified me. But I wanted to move forward, to be loved. That night, he was gentle and didn't do anything I didn't want. I felt safe, and for the first time, I believed I could have a future with him. From then on, I knew he was the man I would marry. When he was accepted to MIT, I was devastated. The thought of him leaving paralyzed me with fear. Both families worked to get me into Boston College so we could stay together. But in Boston, my insecurities began to resurface. He spent long hours studying, leaving me alone. I dreaded being by myself and surrounded myself with friends who helped me escape the loneliness. The group liked to party and drink, and I joined in, desperate to feel connected. Sometimes, when the night ended and everyone started to leave, I flirted with some of the guys to keep them around. It never went further than that, but I kept it from your father. Looking back, those moments planted the seeds of the mistakes that would later haunt me. After we graduated and moved back to Colorado, life felt stable again. Our wedding was a dream, and I was deeply in love. Your father got his dream job, and I worked in insurance. My job was simple and didn't require a degree, but I didn't care. We were happy, or so I thought. But the demons I had buried began to resurface, and within a few months, they broke free. As your father's work hours increased, the loneliness crept back in. I turned to my coworkers for company, spending evenings at bars to avoid being alone. One coworker, James, caught my attention. He reminded me of your father in some ways, but he also had traits that brought back memories of Uncle Jack, something I tried to ignore. One night, after too many drinks, I followed James to his house instead of going home. We ended up sleeping together on his couch. Overwhelmed with guilt, I left immediately, showered, and cried myself to sleep before your father came home. I told myself it was a one-time mistake, but James had other ideas. The next day, he cornered me at work, pulling me into a supply closet under the pretense of privacy. He dismissed my protests, asserting control in a way that mirrored Uncle Jack's actions years ago. I was paralyzed, transported back to the terrified 14-year-old girl who couldn't escape. James made it clear I belonged to him now, using my fear and shame to ensure my compliance. From that moment, my life spiraled further. The ghosts of my past and the choices I made in my desperation consumed me, creating the cracks that would eventually break apart everything we had built. When I got pregnant, I was overjoyed, believing it was your father's child. I hoped this would keep James away, and for a while, it worked. But shortly before your birth, he summoned me again, angry that I was carrying my husband's child. He demanded I name you James. Desperate, I agreed. I had no reason to suspect at first that James was your biological father. You looked so much like your dad, and we were overjoyed at your arrival. I stayed home to care for you, feeling fulfilled and no longer alone. But when I returned to work, James resumed his offense, sometimes bringing a friend, Caleb, to join him. This torment continued until I became pregnant again. Near the end of that pregnancy, James violated me in your father's bed, forcing me to name the baby Caleb. Again, I complied out of fear. After Caleb's birth, James was transferred to the East Coast, and I felt liberated, yet his actions left lasting scars. I realized I had lost respect for your father, who never suspected what I endured. Though my resentment grew, I focused on being the mother I wanted to be for you boys. Over time, I sank into depression and loneliness again. A coworker, Susan, encouraged me to go out and have fun. Her group of friends introduced me to a partying lifestyle, which soon led to meaningless flings. Months later, I discovered I was pregnant again. When Eric was born, I believed he was your father's child, as you all shared similar features. But I refused to name him after your father's dad, asserting my independence. After Eric's birth, I returned to partying with Susan. Another pregnancy followed, and when Daniel was born, I knew the truth. I could see he wasn't your father's son. I prayed no one would notice. Fearing discovery, I agreed with your father to have my tubes tied after Daniel's birth. I stayed home with you boys and tried to be the best mother I could, but I had lost all respect for your father. He never uncovered my betrayals, and to me, that meant he didn't care. Over time, I convinced myself he wasn't worthy of my love, or yours. I need to clarify something. I always understood his work. I went through his briefcase nightly, listened to his conversations, and retained everything he mentioned. Though he didn't realize it, I knew more than he gave me credit for, about secret airplane designs and other classified projects. He was contributing to our country's future while I felt trapped in envy and guilt over my own actions as an unfaithful wife. When you were about 5, I tried to distract myself by volunteering with local nonprofits. Meetings often involved cocktails, and before long they became an excuse to avoid being alone. My fears resurfaced, and I often imagined Uncle Jack lurking around every corner. One night, walking to my car after a meeting, someone approached me. I panicked and swung my purse, hitting a young woman who was simply heading to her car. I broke her jaw. That moment shocked me to my core, making me realize I needed help. A woman at the nonprofit referred me to Dr. Lauren Harper, a psychologist. Lauren quickly identified my struggles as rooted in trauma from Uncle Jack and my more recent experiences. We began unpacking the events that had shaped my behavior. Through therapy, I confronted my past, including the damage I had done to our family. Lauren helped me shift focus to your father and our sons. Over time, I realized the blame I had placed on your father was unfair. He had always been present for games, lessons, and milestones, even while working tirelessly. Lauren's guidance forced me to see that I had been trying to drive a wedge between him and his children out of misplaced guilt and resentment. Slowly, she helped me rediscover my love for him. Lauren became more than a therapist. She became a mentor and a friend. She even visited our home to observe family dynamics, offering insights and support. She was there when I admitted my fear that Daniel might not be your father's son. She urged me to share the truth, but I couldn't. Your father was a man of principle who believed in accountability. I knew he wouldn't accept any explanation that shifted blame to the past. Eventually, he must have discovered the truth. He left a note that simply read, "I know, James." Those days after he left were some of the hardest of my life. You were so strong, and I've never been prouder of you. On the third day, I called Lauren, and she pulled me out of bed, reminding me that my sons needed me. Her support helped me rejoin the living. We began anew, a single mother raising 4 sons. Together, we weathered every challenge. While much of the credit belongs to you and your brothers, your father's influence was still present. His wisdom and guidance, passed down to you, shaped your decisions and character. I tried to find him. Friends, family, and coworkers had no answers. It was as if he had vanished. Months after he left, the FBI contacted me. They questioned me intensely, and I explained that he had left because he discovered my infidelity. I assured them your father was a trustworthy, honorable man. Later, I learned they had located him in Atlanta. They wouldn't share details. Over the years, I've asked about him a few times, but the FBI remains tight-lipped. After 2 years, I decided to hire a private investigator. Though we couldn't afford much, he conducted a thorough search but turned up nothing. Life carried on. You did everything you could to support us while your brother stayed in school. I know the sacrifices you made, giving up college and working to help the family. For that, I'll always be grateful. About a month after you left for your road trip to San Diego, I uncovered a new truth. I understood why you needed that trip. Vanessa Brown wasn't the right person for you. I could see through her and hoped you wouldn't be too heartbroken when you realized it too. When you returned, you were a different person. More confident and aware, and even more helpful to your brothers and me. Before you left, I had been feeling unwell. Food lost its taste, I had persistent cramping, and my weight dropped. While you were gone, I finally went to see a doctor. After some tests, I was diagnosed with cancer. It had started in my ovaries and had already spread by the time we caught it. The outlook was grim. Though treatment could delay the inevitable, it wouldn't stop it. That's when I made another discovery. While searching your father's desk for insurance documents, I came across DNA test results. Like your father, I came face to face with the extent of my betrayal. The weight of it was unbearable. Suddenly, I understood why he had never come back. If the roles were reversed, I would have done the same. This revelation sealed my fate. I contemplated ending things early, but Lauren convinced me I needed to make plans for the future. I focused on ensuring you and your brothers would be stable after I was gone. I encouraged Eric and Caleb to attend San Diego State, then pushed Daniel to join them when he had his relapse, knowing you would end up there to support him. James, I did this for a reason. I didn't want you to witness my decline or for my death to become another dark chapter. I also didn't want to be remembered as a hero. I wanted you all to move on and live the lives your father had always hoped for you. When Eric and Caleb were accepted, I was thrilled. Daniel's challenges gave me the chance to send him to his brothers, knowing you'd step in to help him. I hated using you in that way, but I believed it was for the best. Now, as I lay here on my deathbed, I reflect on the good that came from my life. You, Caleb, Eric, and Daniel are my greatest blessings. Protect each other. Daniel still struggles, but maybe the truth will set him free. The end is near, and I have one last thing to tell you. A friend mentioned last year that she thought she saw your father in San Diego. James, you need to find him. The idea of you boys reconnecting with your father gives me peace. I know my time is short, but knowing he might be there to guide you after I'm gone makes it easier to let go. Please share my story with him. I know he may never forgive me, but he must forgive himself. He is Daniel's father in every way that matters, regardless of biology. He will care for Daniel, as he always has. If you need help, contact the FBI agent who once questioned me. He may have answers. As my pain grows and my days shorten, I know this is my burden to bear. I loved your father, but I destroyed him. Our family was built on lies, and when those lies came to light, it all crumbled. Only your father's strength and the love he gave you boys kept us afloat. Your father is not to blame for any of this. He is your father in every way that matters. Seek him out. He'll take responsibility, as he always has. Accept him for who he is and rebuild your family. James, the cancer is taking over. I've refused the morphine because I need to face this. I know you want to come home, but I can't allow it. This is how it must be. You must remain with your family. As I fade, I imagine you all with your father, and it gives me hope. If you find him, tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I loved him. All my love, Mom. P.S. There's a second letter for your father. If you ever find him, please give it to him. James folded the tear-soaked letter and returned it to the envelope, holding the second letter meant for his father. Overwhelmed by grief and the weight of what he'd learned, he cried himself to sleep. The next morning, James shared both letters with his brothers and their father. James called Lauren, who came over quickly. She shared her memories of working with their troubled mother and her journey toward healing. Then she turned her attention to the family, helping them begin a new chapter. She saw their love and resilience and knew they'd thrive together. With Eric and Caleb enrolled at San Diego State, Daniel living with them, and their father supporting them, the family made arrangements to sell their mother's house. After a week in Colorado, the father and 3 sons returned to San Diego by company jet, while James stayed behind to finalize the sale. He donated most of the furniture and shipped their personal belongings west. Before leaving, James took one last look at the home where they'd grown up, cherishing the good memories. Locking the door for the final time, he started the drive to rejoin his family in California. 5 years later, the family had flourished. Eric and Caleb graduated and found successful careers. James returned to school, working toward a master's degree. Under his father's guidance, Daniel overcame his struggles, excelled academically, and attended UC San Diego. His passion for music also grew, and his band performed regularly in San Diego's Gaslamp district. Their father began therapy with Lauren's recommendation, working through the past with someone named Vivian. There was hope for all of them.